For the record, my name is Brian Worrell, District 4 City Councilor, and I'm the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Ways and Means. Today is January 14th, 2025. It is 2:12 p.m. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.wm@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of this hearing, and individuals will be called on the order in which they signed up and will have 2 minutes to testify. If you are interested in testifying in person, please add your name to the sign-up sheet near the entrance of the chamber. If you're looking to testify virtually, please email our Central Staff Liaison, Megan Corredo, at Megan, meagan.corugedo@boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing is on docket number 0108. Message in the order for your approval, an order authorizing the City of Boston to appropriate the amount of $110 million for purposes of funding the Housing Accelerator Program. The expenditures related to the program are one-time in nature and are assumed to be non-recurring costs of the city, therefore the appropriate to be funded with non-recurring revenue. Today I'm joined by my council colleagues in order of arrival, Council President Louis Jen, Council Fitzgerald, Council Santana, Council Mejia, Council Flynn, Council Coletta Zapata, Council Weber, and Council Murphy. Also want to just acknowledge that we have received letters of absence from Council Pepin and Council Braden. Council Braden has also submitted questions, so when it comes to questions from colleagues, I will also be reading Councilor Braden's questions for the record. I would now like to introduce today's panelists testifying on behalf of the administration. Chief Financial Officer, Ashley Grafenberger, Chief of Housing, Sheila Dillon, Administrator of Boston Housing Authority, Administrator Kenzie Bach, Deputy of Chief of Planning for the Planning Department, Deputy Chief Devin Quirk, and Senior Policy Advisor for the Planning Department, Senior Policy Advisor Ruben Cantor. The floor is now yours.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Well and the City Council for having this hearing on this important topic. I'm Devin Quirk, Deputy Chief at the Planning Department. We're very excited to be here to request from this body a $110 million allocation to launch Boston's Housing Accelerator Fund, an innovative new tool to address housing production and housing affordability in our city. Today's request represents more than a year of hard work putting together the details of this fund and how it will be administered and applied in our city. And I particularly want to thank this council and all the councilors who helped us shape this, particularly Chair Well, who's been for your leadership along the way, and to Ruben Cantor, who I'll hand it over to in a minute, who spearheaded a huge portion of this effort. I can go to the next slide. I want to start by saying that it's really important for us to highlight that this Accelerator Fund is an investment. And of course, I mean that in the context of investing in the people and in housing and small businesses in our city and making our city better. But I also mean that in the context of a true financial investment, like private investors in housing development. Under this proposal, the city will be taking an equity ownership position in private market housing production in Boston. And like all private investors, every dollar invested is expected to come back to the city with a return. The innovation here is that we're asking for a lower return than private market investors, thereby making it easier to finance housing construction in our city. And we're only able to make this proposal to you here today because of the strong financial position that the city's in. So I also want to thank CFO Grafenberger, this council, and all the CFOs before her and the councils before us that have put the city in this strong position to be able to utilize our resources in this way. The proposal before you has numerous benefits. Specifically, it boosts housing production during a difficult economic environment when interest rates and construction costs are high. It requires developers receiving these funds to set aside 20% of their new units as income-restricted housing in line with our inclusionary zoning policy. It requires projects to be shovel-ready and start construction this year. And it emphasizes investment in our values, such as diverse development teams, climate resilience development, and positive community impact. And it also builds upon the deep expertise and of our state partners, particularly our friends at Mass Housing, who we are very fortunate to be able to leverage their experience, their knowledge, and also their funding to Boston's benefit. We have a panel of city leaders here today to answer your questions. I'll start with some background. I'll hand it over to Administrator Bach. We'll talk about the first project that will be funded under this program at the in the BHA's portfolio. Ruben will talk a little bit about how we are investing in private market housing, and Chief Dillon will close us out to talk about how we'll use this program to advance homeownership as well. So with that, let me get started. So we want to start with some data to frame this in a national context. So this slide shows the 10-year trend in housing production at the national level. As you can see, housing production peaked at the national level in 2022 and has fallen off sharply since then over the past 2 years, and we're now at a 10-year low. I share this slide to emphasize that housing production is not an issue that is unique to Boston. In fact, it's a problem across our nation. And our hope is that through the Housing Accelerator Fund and other programs, Boston can demonstrate its leadership in addressing this issue. Next slide. This slide shows a little bit more of a state and local level analysis of the same issue. On the left is housing production in Massachusetts. You can see that we're currently at the lowest level of housing production since the 1960s, with the only exception being the Great Recession of 2008-2010. On the right is Boston's housing production numbers. The dark blue bars on that chart are the market rate housing production. The light blue are the income restricted housing units. There's a good news story here, which is the light blue bars, the affordable units, have been increasing and have stayed steadily strong over the past couple years. We've done a great job maintaining our leadership, and thanks to Chief Dillon and Administrator Bach for their team's work on this to keep affordable housing production high. But you can see a significant drop over the past 2 years in new market rate units starting construction, and that's what we're here to talk about today. On the next slide, you can see a major driver of these trends, which is rising costs. On the left is the cost of construction materials, which have more than doubled since the pandemic. And it's not just the cost of construction materials that are increasing. The cost of capital has also dramatically increased over the past several years. On the right is the federal treasury rate since 2000, and we are currently at a 17-year high. Expensive financing means it's difficult to start construction, and this is the issue that the Housing Accelerator Fund targets directly. Our plan is to bring down the cost of capital for housing construction in Boston in order to spur more production. You might ask, how does market rate housing production affect the average Bostonian? And that's a great question. That's what this slide is meant to give you some data on. This is the trend in rent growth over the past several years. During the pandemic, rents were stable or declined in some cases. But since 2022, rents have been rising. Over the last 5 years, the average rent for a two-bedroom apartment in Boston has increased by over 15%, making it increasingly difficult for anyone to afford to live in our city, as this council knows very well. Simply put, as housing production has decreased, rents have shot up, and our concept is that adding new housing should assist with moderating rent growth. So that was a lot of doom and gloom, and this is a very tiny print slide, but I wanted to make sure I also ended on a high note here in context of all the hard work this council, the city, and this administration are doing to address housing costs in their city. The Housing Accelerator Fund is not a panacea. It won't address every issue that we're seeing, but it's also not by far not the only thing we're doing. And this slide gives you an overview of some of the efforts we're currently undertaking. In the planning and approval process, this council has had many hearings on our legislative reform meant to decrease the timelines for housing production. We've worked, as you know very well, to create a city planning department within City Hall. We've rezoned more areas of our city in the past 2 years than the last 20 years combined to make, for more streamlined pathway for housing growth. We've incorporated the inclusionary development policy into zoning as inclusionary zoning. We've reduced the permitting time for affordable housing by 32%. We've been doing a lot of work for ADU construction. On the affordable side, we've been working to put all of our public land resources into production for housing creation. In response to the mayor's land audit, Sheila and her team have dedicated over $230 million of ARPA funding for increasing affordable housing construction. and we've advocated for a transfer fee to increase resources for affordable housing. We've also supported existing residents in housing stability. We've expanded the housing voucher program. We've stabilized over 5,000 households through financial assistance and legal assistance in rental apartments. We've removed over 1,000 units from the speculative market through our acquisition programs and created more long-term affordable housing. We've advocated, and we've also advocated for rent stabilization at the state level. Sheila will talk about this in her presentation, but we've also really focused a lot on home ownership, helping more than 800 families buy their first home in Boston. And on the issue of the day, we've also been hard at work increasing the supply of housing. Over 17,000 units have been built or started construction in the Wu administration. Over 5,000 of those are income restricted. We've doing a lot of work to convert office space downtown to housing production, and we've increased our supportive housing resources for Boston's homeless households. So that's all just really the tip of the iceberg, and there are amazing teams working across the city every day at trying to increase housing production, increase affordability, and make our city a better place to live and a more affordable place to live. And the Housing Accelerator Fund would be a new tool in that toolbox, and we're excited to talk to you more about it today. So with that as background, I'm now going to turn it over to Kenzie, who's going to talk a little bit about the first project that we envisioned being funded through this program.
Do you want to do this, or do you want me to? Thank you so much, Devin, and thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and all of the councilors. So I'll just, what this slide shows you is that what unites the Housing Accelerator approaches is that they are all investments in getting stuck housing to happen, but they are actually 3 different investment strategies, and so this slide summarizes those 3 a little bit, and then I'll speak to the first one, the BHA one, and then my colleagues will speak to the other 2. So the sort of 3 different types of housing creation we're talking about here. One is at BHA at our Bunker Hill development. This has to do with our redevelopment plan there, and specifically the first investment would be to support our next building in that redevelopment, which is Building F. It's a 265-unit mixed-income building, including 58 deeply affordable replacement units for current public housing residents. And I'll speak more to that in one moment. Just the other 2 strategies, which you'll hear about in a moment, is rental housing in general. So that's rental housing that's stuck, that's on private land throughout the city, where we'll be partnering with Mass Housing. And you can see here investing in sort of 750 to 1,000 units. And the state is really looking to go in with us in a partnership there. They have dollars allocated from the housing bond bill, and by bringing accelerator dollars to bear, we can really kind of supercharge that strategy in Boston specifically, as opposed to just the whole state. And we've already had 18 projects show interest in this form of investment. So again, you'll hear a little bit more about that in a moment. And then the third is the state apparatus is not set up to invest in home ownership starts, but that's a really important piece of the ecosystem too, and we hear a lot from our residents and from many of the councilors, including the chair, about the importance of making sure that home ownership moves as well. So this is basically the idea that the city will actually spearhead a pilot about how to use a very similar investment strategy in making those home ownership projects also get off the drawing room floor and into construction. And there's the current data, as it says on the slide, there's about 10 to 15 projects that are most likely to benefit there. But I want to speak just first of all to BHA Bunker Hill, and maybe we can just go to the next slide. So I think a lot of the councilors have been to the site, know it well. It's actually the largest public housing development in New England, 1,100 deeply affordable public housing units. We're super proud of how that community has kept low-income people anchored in Charlestown for truly many generations now. But unfortunately, it's been in the same buildings. The buildings were built in 1941, and they're obviously past any calculation of useful life that you would do. And there's never been a really significant investment in these buildings. And frankly, they really sort of have experienced the toll of what federal disinvestment from public housing looks like firsthand. So the BHA about 10 years ago now, under Billy McGonigal, one of my predecessors, was really just sort of looking at this 1,100 units and thinking, like, what can we do? We can't retreat from this portfolio in Charlestown. It's way too important to anchor our families, but we don't have close to the kind of resources that we would need to transform these as public housing sites. And so in that context, the BHA put out an RFP for a public-private partner looking to redevelop the site and add density. And so the original partner that came on board was Corcoran. They were then joined a couple of years later by Leggett McCall Properties, who went through a long permitting process and ultimately ended up with a redevelopment plan for the site that is replacing these deeply affordable units and ultimately ending up with it's 2699, so basically 2,700 units on the site. So increasing the density and having it go from being an 100% deeply affordable site to one where you have a mix of incomes in the buildings. But the very first building that the BHA constructed, once that was through permitting and approval, was Building M, which is an all-affordable building, and this is because, and this is actually the same in our South Boston development, when we're doing one of these big redevelopments, we have to make sure that we're going to try to minimize how many families have to move off-site and then come back. And so the best way to do that is to build a first all-affordable building that is on either a blank pad or a part of the site where we have to take down relatively few apartments so that we can kind of start ahead after the first building. And I'm very excited that that's what we're doing, and that actually last week the first families started moving into Building M. Below the photo of the people, you'll see some of the photos of the units on the inside. They're incredibly beautiful. I look forward, in the spring when everybody's all leased up and occupied, we'll have an event with all the counselors. The feedback that's been coming back from families has just been about how valued families feel getting to live in units like these. You can actually kind of see in the second right-hand picture, it's got a really neat construction that's using timber in a sort of unusual way, and because of that, you have it's almost like a wood floor on the ceiling. And it looks really beautiful, and it was so beautiful that ultimately the decision was to leave it so that you could actually see the wood instead of painting it over, because it really looks so lovely. And our partners in this the whole way through have been the Charlestown Resident Alliance, which is the tenant organization for the BHA residents at Bunker Hill. Pretty much all of its leaders are sitting behind me now, so I know that you will hear from them later, but just in case counselors, some of you may have to leave, I want you to know that Nancy Martinez, who's our president of the CRA, Noemi, Phil, Carla are all here. I think Carla's on the Zoom, and then Tina and Shamilia are two also residents who are staff at the CRA, and they're all here, and they've really been our partners in planning the project. They're literally partners in the sense that we have tri-party agreements as part of the agreement, and the Greater Boston Legal Services, who also have representatives here, have been their advisors along the way. And I think one of the things we're really proud about in the Charlestown model is that we've pushed hard on how to have agreements that really protect the public housing residents and make them true partners in the redevelopment, and make sure that they continue to feel real ownership over that community as it redevelops. Unfortunately, the part of this that we didn't plan on was that by the time that we were occupying Building M, we really expected to already have the next building under construction. So this is Building F. It's the first mixed income building to be built on the site. And really importantly for us, it's a mixed income building where the market units are cross-subsidizing the affordables so that we don't have to rely on tax credit resources. Counselors will have gone to many great tax credit funded projects, and it's the vital resource for low-income housing production. But as Sheila and I both know acutely, there is only a finite amount of it every year. And so you can't just keep adding additional things to the pipeline, because it just pushes the pipeline back. We can't widen the aperture. And so for us, having these mixed income buildings be what gets these deeply affordable buildings that Charlestown built is super vital to actually replacing this many units at such a significant site. But we at BHA have experienced the same thing that the whole national market has, that Devin showed the slide on, where because interest rates went way up, the mechanism of having those market units be financeable and therefore pay for producing these deeply affordable units has been broken for the last few years. And so we've been stuck with, we have a pad that is ready for us to begin construction at Building F. We have drawings. We perfected lots of things about the construction mechanics that we're using at this site with Building M, so we are like ready to go, but the issue has been financing. And so for us, this accelerator fund is really a godsend, because what it will do is it will allow us to use a public financing solution to replace some of the like private equity that had originally been like what we were relying on to move the project forward. And it's great because what we don't want to do is we can't just like sink public money and spend it on mixed income housing, right? We don't have enough public money to ever do that, and it creates all kinds of moral hazard issues if the public's not getting its money back. But when you can set up something that's an investment, it's a situation where we can both actually get the public's money back and really make sure that that we're moving this project forward. And I can't describe enough, like, for us, this is meant to be a flywheel. We're trying to get into a mode where we're always doing construction on a new building at the Bunker Hill site, because as this stretches out longer and longer, we have those buildings still from 1941, right? And so then we run into questions about, like, are you going to replace the roof on this building because you thought you were going to be able to replace it in 5 years, but now you're replacing it in 10, right? And so the, like, it's sort of a slow motion thing, but for the BHA, like, the acuteness of the time pressure is incredibly real. And so we really can't afford to sit around waiting for 3 years for interest rates to come down enough to solve this problem for us. Like, it's a problem that our residents are living every day. And so for us, we think the opportunity to imitate what has been done down in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I know I've talked a lot about the model in other hearings with this council, so I won't go into it in as much depth now, but happy to in questions. We really think that Montgomery has shown how this can work, and how it can work when done in partnership with a public housing authority, and we're just incredibly excited on behalf of our residents to get going. So that's the BHA piece.
Thanks. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the fund works. Can you go one more slide, please? So on the slide you see here, on the bar on the left, that is a typical real estate finance deal today. The dark blue section, that's 60% loan, a bank loan, senior debt, and that comes in around 7 or 8% interest rate. The light blue at the top, that's the private equity portion. And the challenge today is that private equity seeks 11 to 15% returns on that. And as Devin expressed, with the rising cost of construction across the board, it is increasingly difficult to find equity investors willing to supply that 40% and able to get that level of return. So with that, the bar on the right shows how the Accelerator Fund and the Momentum Fund work to solve this problem with a 10% of construction cost public equity share. That's a quarter of the equity. So that does two things. It reduces the total amount of equity that's needed for a project, and it increases the ability for investors to meet the returns that they need to actually put the equity in to make projects feasible. The second piece that this product does is the senior debt part, the dark blue, that is being supported by a lower interest Freddie Mac supported loan. So that's more like 6% instead of the 7 or 8% that's on the market today. So those two changes in the bar on the right turn projects that are just a little off from feasibility to feasible and able to get started in construction. And all this in Boston gets its investment back in a reasonable amount of time. Next slide, please. So in making these projects feasible, it provides the city the ability to incentivize a number of our more important priorities and values. So first of all, the top two items, the affordability on the left, 20% affordable for rental housing, that is a statutory requirement. That is the law for mass housing, and that will be the projects that are below 20%, if they want to receive the funding, will have to reach 20%. And the second piece is that mass housing has the deep level of underwriting experience and will ensure that projects are able to meet their standards and are ready to go in less than a year. Ideally, you'd like to see them more like less than 6 months. So assuming they are able to meet those top two thresholds, then the criteria on the second level are triggered. That's where we look at the diversity of the development team, the climate resilient program for a project, as well as community impact such as project location, community support, and other benefits. This is really a great way for us to invest in our values. Next slide, please. So let me preface that most of this slide is pending council approval, of course, of the Accelerator Fund proposal before you today. So projects are currently being evaluated. There have been a bunch of projects that have already submitted for Momentum Fund, and Mass Housing is reviewing those applications for the state funding piece. And the city will be providing its support and advice on those projects along the way. The intent for Mass Housing is to select 2 or 3 projects for its pilot round, and that will happen sometime likely next month, with at least one Boston project, we hope, in that round, again, with the city providing its advice and information. After that, once funding commitments are made and contracts are signed for projects, so in the spring, in April, May, June, that will be when there's a larger group of projects that will be invested in, and when the bulk of accelerator funding on the rental side will be invested. So after that, when Mass Housing lets us know after contracts are signed when a capital call is necessary, when there's a need to invest in the project, the city will maintain the funds until 30 days prior to the developer requiring those funds, at which point we will transfer the funds to Mass Housing to invest directly in those projects, and then Mass Housing will manage the fund from there. Next slide, please. So the partnership with Mass Housing is really critical for the city. Mass Housing currently has over $6 billion in public investment in projects around the state. They are experienced and knowledgeable. They know how to structure a deal like this and to make a successful public investment. In addition, because of the Freddie Mac loan product, there's another layer of underwriting that is really providing a lot of protection for the city and the state's funding. The public equity portion of these investments will be at the front of any returns. So some of these returns may get paid back over time, but the bulk will be at the end when the loan is up at probably about 10 years. And that's, the city will receive its funds first, the state will receive its funds first as well, and then the developer will get its developer fee, and the other equity partners will receive their funds after the city and state are paid back. So I think that those are the key pieces of why we are really excited about this partnership that allows us to not have to build our own infrastructure, our own bureaucracy related to underwriting. So that is the rental portion of the Accelerator Fund. With that, I'd like to pass it over to Chief Dillon to discuss the homeownership piece.
Great. Thank you, Ruben. So I just wanted to begin by highlighting how important, if you could advance the slide, please. Thanks. Next. How important increasing our homeownership rates in Boston has been to this administration and to all of you. There's many of you here that I'm working with very closely on home ownership programs and developments. To date, under the Wu administration, we have assisted 804 home buyers to buy homes through using a city program, down payment assistance, accessing a low-cost mortgage, or buying an income-restricted affordable home, new construction. We are also working very, very hard to build additional high-quality homes that people can afford to buy. Since 2022, we have completed 300 income-restricted homes, and we have another 500 under construction, which is, for Boston, a very large number of for-sale housing. And we're also working to advance a very large pipeline of homes, new homes throughout the city. And for those that aren't ready to buy, we are always working with our nonprofits and our families to get them ready to buy if they so choose. We are continuing to invest more than ever into home buying classes, and we have to date either people are in those classes or have already graduated, over 5,000 attendees. And often credit is an obstacle, so we really have beefed up our credit repair programs, and we have 700 families who have taken advantage of those programs. And I've been doing this a while, and I have never seen this amount of activity to help our families buy in what is a very difficult market. So I'm very proud of all the people that at the Home Center and the BHA and all of us actually who have been working on this issue really, really hard. But while this work is very substantial, and I think we can feel very good about it, we also have, I looked before I walked over, thousands of home ownership units that are in our pipeline but are stuck. They are not moving forward. And for many of the reasons that Devin and Ruben mentioned, high interest rates to construct, the cost of construction is high, materials is high, and my fear is with the fires in the West Coast, we're going to see construction costs even higher still because of wood and appliances, and it goes on and on. To that end, the city is seeking to launch a homeownership investment pilot. And how would this work? We would be seeking to use a portion of the $110 million that we're talking about today. This funding would be used to provide construction financing, probably participating with other lenders, but lending at a lower interest rate to make projects more viable and to jumpstart homeownership projects that are stuck. These investments, of course, would be paid back when the units sell. So really participating in what's pretty traditional construction financing for homeownership projects. Mass Housing, through the Momentum Fund, is unable to invest in homeownership projects. So learning from the discussions and the process that we've gone through so far, we'd be issuing an RFP looking for a financial institution that we can trust with our funding to underwrite and work very closely with us on investing in homeownership projects. So it's another piece of the puzzle to really help our developers, small and larger, jumpstart what we see every day as stalled homeownership projects. So I am also been assigned to conclude, and I will be brief because this has been long. But so we are seeking, of course, $110 million allocation for housing starts. And we're able to do this because we're leveraging a strong financial position to invest in mixed-use housing creation. We are always, I'd like to think, at the forefront of looking at what our housing issues are and trying to use innovation, our best thinking, our financial strength to approach these problems and solve them. And I think that's what this is. It's a very innovative way to work with our partners to unlock production and really work on our housing supply issues. The fund will certainly prioritize projects that have characteristics that are important to all of us. Readiness, of course. Why do this if projects aren't ready to proceed? Actual need. We're underwriting for need. If you don't need this, of course, don't come for low-cost capital. But if you need it and we can determine that you need it, we want to assist. Affordability, climate resilience, diversity of the team, and always community impact. So we really are going to work with our underwriting partners to ensure that Boston values are in every project that gets funded. Construction starts are expected in under a year, with units that are invested in coming into the market in 27 or 28, and I would like to think even maybe a wee bit sooner than that. So with that, I'll conclude, but I will say, I think Boston is in a very strong position to assist the market, and we've all been wringing our hands for so long trying to figure out how to increase supply of market rate and mixed income housing, and I really think this is a good part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you to the administration for your presentation. Also want to just take the opportunity to thank my co-sponsor, Councilor Julie Mejia, on advocating, and also all my colleagues on advocating for the increase in the development fund. Also spent a lot of virtual meetings with Senior Policy Advisor Ruben Cantor. So thank you for your time and the whole administration's time on continuing to invest into housing and increasing our production of housing on home ownership and the rental side. Also just want to add that we've been joined by Councilor Durkin. I'm going to do a little things a little different. We're going to go to public testimony first. So we will start online, and I believe we have one person online. Your name is called. Please say your name, any affiliation, and then you will have 2 minutes to testify. The floor is now yours. CRA.
Yep. Hi, my name is Carla Wirt. I couldn't change my name on Zoom in this forum, sorry. I'm the vice president of the Charlestown Resident Alliance. I've been on here for so long. I believe 2013 we started. I've been a resident for maybe 18, 19 years. We just really need this help because our residents, well, first I want to say hello to everybody, sorry. And thank you for the help that we have had all this time from the beginning. I've been in this field from the beginning. I've not seen anything but complete transparency and help since the board has been able to be in this field. And it's a one-time thing that I haven't seen before, where residents are so involved that we have a voice. And there's BHA, as far as we've seen, has done everything they can. There's just no more Band-Aids. You can't put any more Band-Aids on this place. You can't. We've had residents that have had to wait longer, way longer than they should have, just so we could get the first building done with health. And other residents, we need out of these buildings. Like I said, there's no more Band-Aids. There's no more help that can be done to them. I've been here since the beginning, and we've done an amazing thing here working together. Our residents always have a voice. They're always involved. They're always notified. We've done everything we can to make this the best tri-party deal that we can in all parties. We've been through thousands of hours of meetings, working on every document, every single step of the way. We work all together. Our residents just really need new houses, and we need the help. I understand all these funds being paid back and forth are important, and I understand that, but we need somewhere to live, and that's more important to us because we just can't live in these places anymore, and there's no other way to fix them. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to those that's looking to testify that's here with us in the chambers, starting with Nancy Martinez and then Tina Goodnow.
Hi, everyone. I will say my speech in Spanish, and I got my translator here next to me, okay? So, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Nancy Martínez y me da orgullo decir que soy la presidenta de la Alianza Residentes de Charlestown.
Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Martinez, and I'm proud president of the Charlestown Resident Alliance.
La CIA representa a los residentes de Bunker Hill y aboga por oportunidades de vivienda justa, equitativa, saludables y accesible en nuestra comunidad.
The CRA represents the resident of Bunker Hill and advocates for fair, equal, healthy, and affordable housing opportunities in our community.
Cuando escuchamos por primera vez que iba a ser un proyecto de desarrollo de Bunker Hill, tuvimos muchas preguntas.
When we first heard about the development, we had many questions. How can this building be improved so everybody has a safe and affordable place to live?
¿Cómo se puede mejorar estos edificios para que todos tengan un lugar seguro y cómodo para vivir? Y ahora tenemos nuestro primer edificio terminado.
And how we have our first building My apologies. How could these buildings be improved so everybody has a safe and comfortable place to live? And now we have our first building completed.
Después de años de trabajos, unos residentes de nuestra comunidad ya entraron a sus apartamentos nuevos la semana pasada.
After years of work, the CRA has able to see some of the new apartments at the end of the last year. Through this process, we listen to our residents about their hopes, fears, and needs.
A lo largo de este proceso, escuchamos las esperanzas, los temores, las necesidades de nuestros residentes y estamos muy felices y orgullosos de darle la bienvenida nuevamente a estos hogares.
Now for this development, we are so happy and proud to welcome them back to these homes.
Quiero agradecerle a todos los que nos apoyaron y nos apoyan. Quiero agradecer hasta aquí hoy las gracias a Kenzie Cobb. Thank you, Kenzie. Quiero dar la Autoridad de Vivienda de Boston, a Legge McCall y Joe Corcoran. Gracias a nuestro City Council y a todos los miembros de la Junta y el personal del CIR pasados y presentes.
I would like to thank to everybody who had our backs and they helped us and to reach to here today. Thank you to our
Kenzie Cobb.
thank you to Kenzie Bach and the authority of Boston Housing, Legal McCall, E. Corcoran. Thank you to the City Council and every member of all of the personnel of the CRA, present and past.
Gracias al alcalde Wood, al City Council y a la ciudad de Boston por su apoyo en este proyecto y en el próximo edificio. Y gracias a los residentes de Bunker Hill, es un honor representarlos en una construcción de esta comunidad. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Major Wu at City Council and the City of Boston for your assistance in this project and in our next building. And thank you for the residents of Bunker Hill. It's an honor to represent in the construction of this community.
Thank you, everybody. We really need these buildings to be destroyed and have been brand new because there's no way to put a plaster to those apartments because everything else fall down. We really need this. And I want to live a little bit better than what I live right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tina Goodnow, followed by Phil Wright.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tina Goodnow. Good afternoon, honorable City Council members. Again, my name is Tina Goodnow. I have the honor and privilege of being the Executive Director of the Charlestown Resident Alliance. The CRA is the official tenant organization elected to represent the interests of more than 2,500 residents who live at the Bunker Hill Public Housing Development. I realize that there are other issues surrounding the Accelerator Fund, but we ask of all of you today is that you don't lose sight of the greater mission here, absolutely critical housing for families in desperate need right now. I have lived at Bunker Hill, the housing development, for more than 15 years. I have raised my children at Bunker Hill, and I know very well what it means to worry as a parent for the safety and well-being of my sons. My family has experienced homelessness. In the past, we know firsthand how many families urgently need permanent, deeply affordable housing. Our Bunker Hill residents are mostly minorities, many are disabled, many do not speak English, and we are all low-income families. Each of our Bunker Hill families know personally what it means to be looked down on and excluded. No one has to tell us what discrimination and economic exclusion looks like and feels like. And we know from our lived experiences how important it is to have equal access to opportunities to improve our lives. These buildings were built in 1941, and we know we can't keep on living in the terrible conditions of these buildings. I personally, the mothers of my grandchildren, do not always feel comfortable with bringing my grandchildren to the house because of the conditions of the apartment. And so that's something that I struggle with personally. So when BHA put out a request for private developers to come up with a way to rebuild all 1,100 of our distressed housing units at Bunker Hill and to do it without federal help, our tenant organization decided to be at the table with our voices to ensure that the best interests of our residents are advanced in all planning and negotiations. We have gotten far, to say the least, and created a true public-private partnership that is a national model. Market rate units will subsidize affordable units. It is hard to believe that we've already made history with the first building being completed just a few weeks ago. It will deliver 102 affordable homes for our families, and the first group of families have begun to move in. Now we must not lose momentum because of market conditions that are out of our control. This is why the Accelerator Fund is so important, to close the gap of the funding necessary to keep moving forward with building and breaking ground for the project's second building, hopefully next year. We are proud that we guarantee that all the units, whether market or deeply affordable, will be the same in quality, size, fixtures, and amenities, and that it is a healthy, passive house development. And we will continue to be at the table across all the phases to work toward ensuring that what is built is a truly welcoming, diverse, mixed-income community with a vibrant community center that provides inclusive programming for all. But one thing for sure is that we, the families who live in the Bunker Hill development now, cannot afford any further delays to continue to move this project forward now. It's been a long time. We've been waiting a long time, and I think it's just time to keep going. And I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you here today. Thank you, Ken Ziebach, Mayor Wu, and especially Councilor Gigi Coletta, who has been beside us from the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil Wright?
Not for nothing, Tina, but that's a tough act to follow. So, I didn't get much sleep last night, and honestly, as I stand here before you, I am as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Because, you know, this for us on the CRA is really life and death. I can only speak to my own experience, and I have the privilege of being able to say that I am the proud father of the CRA. There was one other individual besides myself that was elected in 2013. She was forced to resign in disgrace, and I'm still here. For 2 years, at 5:30 every single Friday morning, I had to get up in order to be at Suffolk Construction at 7:30 on Friday mornings to plan all the details of this project. And I gotta tell you folks, you will be hard-pressed to find anything greener on the planet than what we are doing in Charlestown. I can only relate my own experiences. We would like to have had tenants here, but they have lives and they're busy. The apartment I am currently in, I am now in my 12th year there. For the first 8 years that I was there, I never even saw one cockroach. Then my upstairs neighbor, who has mental health issues, decides that he wants to drink on his medication, and 4 times now he has managed to leave his kitchen sink running while passing out. So, needless to say, he has flooded my apartment 4 times, and now I have a roach problem that's never going to get better. The conditions of these buildings is beyond deplorable. Words do not justify how bad they are and how desperately we need this. Now, I want to give a shout out to Leggett McCall and Suffolk Construction for one very simple reason. In dealing with them, I get to bring back a term that's not heard often these days, and that term is salt of the earth. Both of those organizations are absolutely the salt of the earth. They have done amazing work, and I don't know if I'm wrong in feeling this, but this wouldn't even be happening if Leggett McCall hadn't gone down to Montgomery County in Maryland and found out about the Accelerator project and brought it back here. So I'm old school. First one in gets the best. So originally we're told that the second building finances are a done deal. But then questions start arising, okay? And now we're wondering, it's like, wait a minute, they gave us the $110. You know, you want to do something really green, you want to do something right away. This is the perfect opportunity. So, on behalf of the CRA and all of the residents in Bunker Hill, we are asking that you prioritize the CRA for the next 3 buildings so we can get this project moving. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now we'll go to councilors for our first round of questions, starting with Council President Louis Jett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank all the members of the Charlestown Residents Association, Carmen, Nancy, Phil, Tina, the person who was on Zoom. What really struck me was the person on Zoom talked about this being a co-governance model. And I think that's really fascinating. It's something that we don't see that often, and we don't see cities doing that often, that you as residents in Charlestown are also active participants at the table represented by GBLS, determining what it is that you want to see, that this development is happening on your terms. And I just want to say that that's very encouraging to witness. And I thank the city for appreciating how important it is sometimes for us to do co-governance alongside our residents who have a lot to teach us about the housing conditions that you all deserve here in the city. So I just want to thank all of you. I think innovation in housing is important, especially as we have this housing crisis. So I'm very excited to see this innovation. I know on the City Council we've held multiple hearings about social housing, about how we're leveraging our fiscal strength, which we're doing here, to build more housing. And so I have a few questions about, and Devin, you spoke to the fact that this is going to follow our 20% inclusionary, which is also really great. I have a question regarding how we're guaranteeing the 4 to 6% return. What is a timeline of that 4 to 6% return? And if anyone, maybe it's Ashley, Chief Grafenberger, wants to speak to, we are leaning into our fiscal strength here. How, if at all, do we see this having an impact on our AAA bond rating, or how did we consider that rating in our determination that we, would use this amount of free cash to engage in this work?
Sure. I'll start with the first question. So by working with Mass Housing, which will be both underwriting the projects and signing the contracts with the developers on the city's behalf, the city is guaranteed those funds. The way that the returns will work is on an annual basis. We will see what the profit and loss statements are from these projects, and the city will earn a portion of the profits based on sort of a prorated share of our equity investment. And at the end of the loan, which is probably about 10 years, could be extended to as much as 15 years, depending on the deal that is it offered. That will be when the city gets the rest of its funds plus the yield that is agreed to at the beginning. So that's all contractual, and we're guaranteed those funds.
Thank you. And, Chief, is this on the second question? Okay, one question for you, Ruben, is Is that the same timeline as the private market in terms of seeing returns?
Yes.
It is. Okay, thank you. And not that if it were different, I'd also be happy with that because I do think it's important for us, if we're trying to secure housing as a human right, to be building these alternatives to how the market works. So I just wanted to put that out there. But thank you. It's good to know that it's functioning on the same timeline.
Thanks for your question, Councillor. So to the question of our bond rating and how we think this will or will not impact this, I think it's important to know that the city is in a great financial position. We are really well reserved. We don't anticipate that this would cause us to not meet any of our reserve targets, and especially since we anticipate that these funds will come back to us with some amount of return in the future. We're not concerned that it would impact our reserves in the way the rating agencies view us.
Great, yeah, especially because it's coming back into our coffers. Then my last question is, I see we have here information from Sage on Fountain, a project in Roxbury, an affordable homeownership project that I was happy to support. They obviously is this here, are they looking for funding from this accelerator fund, or is this just here as an example? Okay.
That project is completely built.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And people have moved in and they're happy. So that was a combination of construction and public subsidy. So they're not going to be seeking our funds because they already have completed the project.
Okay, we just have a presentation here, so it might be for later for the later panel. This is truly my last question, is on, so we have public housing projects that we're supporting, which are great, Charlestown, maybe South Boston, some others, and then there's going to be an amount of projects that have been slow to get off the start. I know one of them, also in Roxbury, P3 is one of them. What will that process look like for folks who have projects that are ready to get off the ground, but for this gap in funding? What is it going to look like for projects? Since folks are already reaching out to us in terms of like, how can they tap into the Accelerator Fund, and I want to be able to give them the right information.
Great. Well, I would say, first of all, any developer that reaches out to you, please pass along my information. I'm happy to talk with them and also put them in touch with the state. At Mass Housing, they've been terrific reaching out to and talking with a number of developers along these exact lines. There has been an open application process for the pilot round, and they're going to reopen that for the full round for the spring. So entities that think that they are pretty much shovel ready to go, and this is the last gap, this is the need that they have to fill that final piece, and that can get started within the next year. We would encourage them to apply with Mass Housing, go through the underwriting process, and then Mass Housing will inform us of projects that meet their underwriting criteria and that they deem ready to go, that have fulfilled all the permitting requirements to get a permit in short order and able to put a shovel on the ground. The Mass Housing is expecting that there are going to be some projects that won't be ready right now, but might be ready, next year. So they're withholding a little bit of funds for next year's round to account for that. But I don't think that's what I think we're going to try to put our money to use as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you. Thanks to the admin. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you to the residents of Charlestown for coming out and for co-governing along with our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Council Fitzgerald, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panel. As you all know, I have great respect and admiration for all of you individually and as a group. So thank you for coming in today. There are some questions I'm going to ask today that I think some were answered in the presentation. Others we may know the answer to, but it's more to reiterate the answer for those at home as well, right? So let's start with, where does the $110 million come from? Because obviously, given everybody's recent spike in attention to our taxes and their tax invoice that have come in, that's a lot of questions that we've got as councils. I'm sure my other colleagues have as well, about why are we increasing when we've got 110 going out? So just so they understand, where does that 110 million come from?
I'll take that question, Councillor. So that 110, this appropriation is anticipated to come from our unrestricted available fund balance. The city, as of our most recent financial report that we just completed at the end of last year, is about $1.3 billion in unrestricted fund balance, and then a portion of that is what is determined to be spendable by the Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services. So we will utilize a portion of that spendable fund balance to source this appropriation.
Great. And is this fund being funded by anything else other than that? And could we assume, because would that also be called the rainy day fund, what you just explained, would, in layman's terms?
Sure. So it's, unrestricted fund balance are funds that we could utilize to deal with unanticipated costs or, other non-recurring expenses like this one, because they are non-recurring funds. They're sort of funds that the city has accumulated over many, many years and is available for one-time needs.
Great.
And we are going to pair our money with the state's money, which I don't think is exactly your question, but just to make it clear that our this investment leverages state momentum fund dollars. So the dollars that actually go to projects are multiplied by the state's investment.
Right. Any state investment is not part of the 110,
Right.
but is to
Beyond.
be paired with the 110 as it goes forward. Understood. I had a question about what is the criteria for being selected as a project. Can I assume we can go to the Boston investment priorities slide, and that is basically the criteria that we have, and I don't need to go over that again, but I'll take that as the answer there. Who will be choosing the projects to invest in?
It will be a close partnership between us and the state. The state's going to perform the technical analysis around financeability, the return on investment. We'll layer that on with the evaluation you see before you, and the evaluation criteria around impact on the city, diversity of development team, resilience, et cetera. And between that group of leaders here and our colleagues at the state, that's how we'll make the decision.
Okay. And I had a question, one, on how do we see this return get actualized? I believe that was answered in the previous questions. But Ruben, you did say we will look at the profit and loss annually, right, and then determine. Those words, there's profit and loss. So in the result of it's ever a loss, how does that work out for us?
Well, the advantage of rental housing in this market is that over the course of 10 years, things can sort of fluctuate, go up and down. So at the end of that time, there's a really strong expectation that there will be strong profit and that the city will earn its investment back. So at any 1 year, if there's a loss, the city is not going to be out additional funds. The amount that we're putting in, that's the amount. That's not... That doesn't change if the developer, for instance, has cost overruns. They have to seek those overruns from someone else. They're not able to access additional city equity funds.
Understood. And if there was ever a change to the market in whatever way where a loss is actualized, what is the effect going for? That sunk money, right? Is it just that's a lost investment and a percentage of it is all 100? It just depends on individual projects and how they do?
Yeah, I mean, if you're saying under the theory of there being a major housing collapse in 10 years and the amount is due, that would be a negotiation with the state on exactly how that would work.
And we'd be in the preferred equity position, so we'd be paid before any other equity investors in the project. So I suppose it's theoretically, and it's an investment, so any investment, there's a potential for loss. But if we're in the preferred position after any debt on the project is retired, we'd be the first equity provider paid out, and then any other equity investors. So it seems likely that over a 5 to 10 year investment period, that 4 to 6% could be relatively easily achieved.
I guess it's just, even if a project itself, even if, $5 million going to a project in this neighborhood and that project were to fail, never mind, not the overall market per se, but the project individually for whatever reason, do we just write it up, that's $5 million as a loss and you have to take your lumps?
Right, I guess the answer to your question is that the money would not recycle back, right? We would not see the return. But at the end of the day, this is why we're partnering with Mass Housing. They have substantial experience investing in market rate housing production. They have a team of underwriters that their whole job, like any investor, any market investor, and we're doing this investment alongside market investors, we're going to ensure that the risks are very minimal.
Understood. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Councilor Santana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for our panelists for being here. First, I just want to thank our BHA Charlestown residents for being here. As a BHA kid myself from Alice Taylor, just really love to see the chamber filled with our residents. I also just want to thank the chair for really scheduling this important hearing. My questions are going to be about it's going to go about the home ownership, but before that, I do want to talk about, this is something that I'm very passionate about. My inaugural speech on the Boston City Council was on exploring mixed income social housing, and I've held many hearings with many of our panelists here today, many of my colleagues, and it's just great to see the administration take such a bold step in being able to make this a reality. And, I often say, again, as someone who grew up in out-of-state or BHA apartments and still have family who lives in BHA apartments, I always, I'm very grateful and proud product of BHA, but ever since working also for my former boss, Councillor Bach, I was always an active, I was always very loud about the conditions that BHA residents live in, right? I think BHA gave my family and I the opportunity to, I always say this, not just stay here, but really thrive here in the city. But some of the conditions that we see in BHA are we need to really improve on. So I really love this model. I really love what this does for our BHA residents across all of our neighborhoods, and full support of that on that end. My questions is towards the home ownership piece, and I think it might go to the chief here. Can you talk about the return on investments on the home ownership piece? I know you mentioned some of the not transportation, but some of the construction costs that will come back. But with the BHA model, I mean, you're looking at market rate housing, and then that will subsidize some of the other housing. So how does that piece in terms of returning investments work for the home ownership piece?
It's a fabulous question, and I think what we have to do first is understand why some of the home ownership, mixed income, or market rate projects are stuck, right? So what's keeping them back from starting construction? Because we all know it's a very strong, once it's built, it sells. So looking at what the developers need to actually start construction and secure the construction, the market rate construction financing, that will, once we start underwriting it with a financial partner, it will tell us what we need to lend the city resources at or for. My hunch is we're going to be lending our resources below market, blending that with other financial institutions' lending authority and instrument, and then get a sort of a blended construction loan. So very long-winded way of saying, I don't know the exact percentage that we would be seeking as an interest rate or a return on our funds. We're going to have to do some financial analysis first to understand why projects are stuck. Do we need to lend this money at 4%? Do we need to lend it at 3.5%? I don't know yet, but we need to do that analysis. The nice thing about home ownership projects is, like I mentioned earlier, they're rather simple. They've got very few components. So when we put the money in, the money will come back pretty quickly. So even if we have to lend it at a lower interest rate, we'll get that money back very quickly so we can redeploy it. I don't know, Ruben, if you have anything else you want to add.
I think you covered. But really appreciate that. To that point, I mean, you talked about some of the programs that we use to help some our residents to be able to purchase homes. So except I'm not talking about the construction costs here, but for some of those programs that we talked about that help residents to be able to buy a home, would this fund be used to invest in those programs?
I think the short answer is no. So right now we've got money to provide down payment assistance for our residents, which is great, and people are utilizing it. We've got money to buy down interest rates at banks, mortgages. And we've got subsidy that we're actually buying long-term affordability in home ownership projects, developments. This is more of an investment during the construction for market or mixed income development. So it's another tool in the sort of the home ownership continuum.
And Councilor, if I can say one thing on that. Something that we've been really proud about in the BHA First Home Program, which thank you to the council for supporting twice with ARPA votes and to the chair for all his advocacy on it, is that the vast majority of our participants have bought market rate homes, right? A lot of them like using the Section 8 to home ownership, which of course is great for, like people actually being able to accumulate equity, and it can really change generational wealth. And so one of the consistent things that we hear from that group, and so, the last numbers I had was we had 73 BHA families that had closed, 67 of them buying in Boston, and all but 4 buying market rate homes, is just that it's like, really about supply. So I think like in that sense, it's like this is a different thing because it's approaching the supply problem. But the good thing is that because of these other tools we have reason to believe that a bunch of our families that we're assisting are going to be able to access that supply, but they can't access it if it doesn't exist.
No, totally makes sense. Really want to again thank our panelists. I'm in full support of the Accelerator Fund here, and I'm looking forward to seeing this play out here in the city of Boston. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Council Mejia. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy New Year, everybody. It's good to see y'all. So I guess some of my questions are a little bit different than what you are accustomed to here, just because that's my role, is to always bring different perspectives into this chamber, because we get a lot of questions, and some of the questions that we've gotten relate to kind of just understanding a bit more around the dynamics around these returns on investments. People want to know, and if you can clarify for us whether or not Joseph Cochran, the company, Leggett McCall, the Boston Housing Authority, the Charlestown resident, would you ever plan to sell the development? And if so, would the city see any returns on those investments beforehand?
So, so I should explain that the Boston Housing Authority deals, all these public-private partnerships are on long-term ground leases, so the BHA never gives up the land. We have 99-year leases, and one of the big things that was part of that tri-party negotiation with the residents was around, like, basically exerting a lot of public and resident control over the future of the development. So both like control in terms of deciding anything that happens, guarantees of permanent affordability on the deeply affordable units, but also like a big part of the negotiation was for money for the BHA and for resident supports and stuff. So the basic answer is like there is a portion of building new buildings which equity investors inherently own because that's the value of the equity that they're putting in. But basically what's happening in a world where the BHA and the city are helping to solve the financing problem with like public dollars is that we own more.
Administrator Bach, because I only have 3 minutes and I still have some more questions. So I just need a short answer, yes or no.
So what I'm saying is there's a portion of improvements that are owned by whoever's investing in them, and we're going to own a larger portion because of this type of investment.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. Now, it says here that we'll replace 1,100 public housing units with almost 2,700 units of public income restricted and market rental. How many current residents are right now occupying the space? And under this new program, how many will still be able to occupy the space?
Yeah, so one of the things that we provide is like a guarantee of the right to return to our families. So right now, we moved, I don't know, I'll get you the exact number of how many families moved off for the first phase.
For the record, it is fair to say that everyone who is a current BHA resident will continue
to be there and be able to
regardless of what happens, right?
Yeah.
Period. End of story. We got that on the record. Awesome. Thank you. That's all people really want to care about. The other question that I have is in regards to utilities. There's been some concerns that some folks right now, under their lease, they have everything included. Under this new construct, folks are going to have to pay for utilities. Can you confirm or deny if that's true or not, please?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That was actually a big point of resident advocacy, and we made sure that residents are going to continue to be in the same position of not paying for the utilities, specifically the assisted residents, the deeply affordable, those ones, yes.
Everyone.
So, but market rate tenants will continue to pay for their utilities like they do in the general market, but that's been a thing that's come up repeatedly with the public housing program versus the leased housing program, so it's something that was guaranteed.
So for the record, for those who are tuning in, all the folks who are right now, nothing's going to change dramatically for you. You're going to have your unit and you're going to have all your utilities covered. This situation will not impact any of those things, which I think is one of the main concerns for a lot of folks who are tuning in who may not be in favor or may not be here. This is one of the discrepancies that have come up. And then I guess what I am curious about is, Ashley, you talked about discretionary, it's great to see the administration, the whole kit here. We often don't get this when we have other types of hearings, so I want to utilize this moment that I have you here. so that people who are following can understand. In the incidents, I'm going to talk about Madison Park real quick. And I know we're not here to talk about Madison Park, but I'm going to utilize my time to just get some clarity. Because there's some folks right now in the Madison Park redesign is that their project is being put on hold, Madison Park High School. Is the fact that you can utilize the 110 Accelerator Fund for this project, what would I say to constituents who ask why not utilize dollars to even support White Stadium or Madison Park? Why this and not others? Just for the sake of clarity for folks who are tuning in, please.
Sure. I think, number one, unlike a capital project, we anticipate that these funds will come back to the city at some point with some amount of return. Whereas if you took that same amount of money and put that into a capital project, a city capital project, you're not going to have that come back. You're just going to have spent that money. And so there's a slightly different dynamic here where we can, temporarily sort of utilize these funds to build some needed housing stock and get that back. Whereas, the choice would be otherwise to spend it on something else. And then you've just kind of spent down that surplus fund.
Thank you. Are we going to have a second round?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back.
Thank you. Council Flynn, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the panel for being here. Of the $120 million, how much will go towards Bunker Hill redevelopment?
So the exact number,
Yes.
we don't have because basically, so one of the goals here is to spend
Or
only...
to give us an estimate?
Yeah, so I think it'll be more to the Bunker Hill projects than to the private projects that we're talking about in Momentum Fund, because when you look at Ruben's stack, we're replacing, sorry, this is the page with the bar charts.
Or give me an estimate.
Yeah, so it's
5 million, 10 million?
no, it'll be definitely in the well north of 10 million, like double digits.
10 million,
period.
between 10 and 20 million?
It could be more than 20 million. It's what it's about is, and the reason I can't give you an exact number.
Okay, I just want to get to other questions too.
Just, if I can just say, Councilor.
Yep, sure.
We only want to invest the public dollar that we have to, so we have to compare it to the private dollars that are available.
So it's probably-
so that it's the minimum amount that we need to make the project happen.
So probably around 20 to 30 million? Is that accurate, Bob?
Again, the city doesn't want to negotiate against ourselves on these projects.
Are we able to invest any of the money into BHA to help with their elevator system throughout BHA? We have major challenges throughout the BHA developments, especially in my district. Is there an opportunity to use some of this money for other BHA developments, such as Ruth Barclay? I know there is going to be some funds allocated there soon, but there's a lot of challenges throughout the BHA system. Can we use funds for that?
So this is a little bit the same question that Ashley answered. The BHA, obviously, we're super grateful to you and others for advocating for that capital spending on the elevators. We're putting additional federal and state capital money into the elevators at Ruth Barclay, and I suspect we will continue to hope that the city, through capital and other means, can support us there, because the city views that as, again, spending, like the CFO just mentioned, as opposed to investment.
So
for this fund, it's only investment.
We wouldn't use it for that?
Yeah, because unfortunately,
Okay.
we'd never get a dollar back on the elevator spending.
Did we ever use any ARPA money on BHA elevators?
Yes.
How much did we use?
I don't have the exact number, but it's part of the housing improvements support from the council.
How much money do you think we need to invest for BHA elevator systems?
Well, one of our challenge, the overall number, right, we've got north of 100 elevators at the BHA, and a huge number of them, in an ideal world, right, would be replaced. So you're easily looking, I think our overall capital backlog at BHA is like $1.5 billion, and I think the elevator number is easily well into the hundreds of millions.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer, and I appreciate that. And just for the audience and people to know that I represent the largest number of residents living in public housing, so these issues are important to me. I want to make sure my constituents have an opportunity to live in dignity. I'm going to support this because I have respect for the Bunker Hill residents. South Boston, you mentioned on page 2 of this brochure. Tell me about that, Administrator Block. Is Mary Ellen McCormick part of the 110?
So we think it's a place where if this model, if we get going in this model, as we've discussed, it brings money back right into the fund. And if the council and the mayor in the future have confidence in this model, we think that it could work in the same way at Mary Ellen McCormick, because it's just like Charlestown in that we have a bunch of these mixed income buildings.
But
permitted.
you're not planning to use it for that, are you?
So no, the first building that the fund's making the commitment to on the BHA side is this stuck building at Charlestown, Building F, and that's because at Charlestown, we've built the first all-affordable building, and we're stuck now. At Mary Ellen, as you know, we're just about to have we'll actually have shovels in the ground in the spring on the first building at Mary Ellen, so it's not quite ready yet to be at the mixed income building first construction.
So the $70 million after Bunker Hill project, that really hasn't been spoken for yet.
So there's obviously all three of these things, the mass housing partnership dollars and the homeownership pilot dollars and the BHA approach are all together in that 110. And I think with the other projects, similarly, it's like you only want to give every project the minimum that you have to get it to go so that you can do more projects.
Was there an opportunity to put any of this money to support relief for homeowners for property taxes?
Take that, Ashley.
I know the answer is no, but is there an opportunity to do it?
So I think in the legislation that the mayor filed yesterday, there's mention.
No, I know that, but I'm saying this program here, the 110, is there an opportunity to use any of that towards relief for homeowners?
Similar answer to what we said before, this is really being viewed as an investment that will come back to us, whereas that would be sort of a one-time expenditure. That wouldn't, so a slightly different purpose.
And as you know, Councillor, we need state permission to do those rebates. That's why it's in the legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll now go to Councilor Coletta Zapata. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the administration and the panel for being here and for your great work. I'm going to speak to the CRA. I'm just so proud of you all. It's been an honor, and I promised myself I wouldn't get emotional. I can only imagine what it's like for you. It's been an honor to work with you all over the last 7 years, and I just want to thank you for your leadership, because there have been many stops and starts. There's been a lot of adversity. There's been a lot of detractors, but you all have remained consistent and anchored in your values and have been incredible in your leadership. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here, for taking time out of your day to provide your perspective and your lived experience. It means a lot to all of us. And it has been a long time coming. It's been about 10 years of this discussion just from my colleagues. We talk about maintenance issues. That was brought up in the beginning of the hearing, and what the conditions look like in the interim before the demolition and construction of certain buildings. We get emails and calls every week, I think, Elaine and Ellie. My Charlestown liaison, Elaine, is here. And we talk about broken stove, sinkholes, roofs, HVAC systems. Just things are going defunct, and it really is deplorable conditions. And so I think because these buildings were built in 1940, they've housed generations of Charlestown residents like Marie Kondo. We have to thank them for their service and let them go. Residents deserve more than what they're living in right now. And so every day, week, month, year that passes by without any effort to address these issues or provides progress for this project, I think, to me, is an active choice to neglect these incredible people and the thousands of residents that live in Charlestown, and to neglect their basic human right to dignified, healthy housing. And so, of course, I'm in support of this. I want to thank the administration for this innovative approach, which will provide a return on our investment. And so I think that there's a lot of chatter that's been out there, maybe some misinformation about who will and who won't benefit from this sort of agreement. I'm happy that my colleagues have asked, where is this money coming from? Those are also questions that I've gotten. So I appreciate your answers on that. I definitely have a lot more clarity. But I think directly to Administrator Bach, because some people are concerned about who this really helps, is it the developers or the residents? Can you speak to who will benefit from this model moving forward?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Coletta, and thank you for your support for our residents, and not just support like kind of abstractly, but like really knowing them as people and caring about them. And you heard, I mean, we just have an incredible group of resident leaders at the site. And for us, that's really who this is about helping. It's about helping our Boston Housing Authority residents get these new apartments that they deserve and you know, live in it. And also, like, not for nothing, as you know right now, it's an 100% residential community. There's like no amenities mixed in. There's like, you know, you can't easily, you have to walk a long way to get just to a store. And so for us, bringing like, you know, retail, bringing more like active park space, bringing a community center, there's just like a ton of things in this site that will just be transformative. And that's really who it's for. And you know, I think the thing that I want to say to anybody who's sort of worried about like, you know, where's the profit motive in all of this is like, the truth is that the profit motive is not providing this housing. The real estate investment trusts and private equity folks of the world are not financing these buildings. If they were financing them, they would be happening. So like our fundamental problem is that if we wait around for the profit motive, we won't get the housing that our people urgently need. And as you all know, when you're like public officials who are trying to represent the public trust, just having to like farm out whether that's going to be delivered on to the private side, it's incredibly disempowering and it's incredibly frustrating for residents. So we really see this as like a public finance solution for stepping in. And what's great though is that it's an investment, right? So the public's still going to get its money back, but we're not going to like have our residents be held hostage to that world of private finance. And I just would say that if this were a profitable opportunity for private finance right now, these buildings would be moving forward. So that, you know, and that was frankly the engine that the BHA was originally betting on when we first started this development. That was part of the goal of the mixed income development. And now, you know, we're having to go a different route.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Chair, can I just have one more question? Thank you. Thank you for that, Administrator Bach. Talking about the tri-party agreement and the co-governance model, I do just want to shout out Leggett McCall and Corcoran Jennison for their work. I also want to give a shout out to Chris Knox, who is the maintenance director, who is doing his best to button up and play whack-a-mole with some of these maintenance requests and putting these Band-Aids on some of these buildings. So I just want to shout out him and say thank you to him. And really to my colleagues, as we are considering this appropriation, just please remember to center the lived experience of these residents. Of course, it is our fiduciary responsibility to ask these questions, to understand where the money is coming from, what is the return on investment, all of that. But these are people's lives. So I just want to thank all of you for being here. Thank you, CRA, and thank you to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Weber, the floor is yours.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I believe Councilor Murphy was here before. No? Okay.
Oh, I was just going off of what's on the list. Yeah.
But, okay, it's up to you. Okay, thank you. Thanks to all the panelists. And you know, I think, like many of my colleagues, I support this strongly. I think it's a great concept. The plan is good, and I also think I know Chair Worrell has spent a lot of time working on this particular issue, and I hope in the end we can use this as kind of an example of how, you know, the administration and the council can work together to really tackle important problems, and this is one of the most important issues we have in the city. So I guess maybe this is for Chief Gravenberger. In terms of you put the money into this fund, how do we make sure the money goes back into the fund? What mechanisms are there to make sure, you know, it just doesn't go into the ether and then we have this discussion 10 years from now?
Yeah, so I can help with that actually. If you want.
Oh, anybody can answer.
So we're working on an MOU with Mass Housing that will govern the terms of the investment. They'll make it on our behalf and they'll return it to the fund at the term of investment. I think this goes to some of Councilor Plata's questions, but the average rate of return is probably somewhere between 4% and 6%. A private market investor would likely be looking for like a 15% return. So that is the innovation, is that we're looking for a lower return than any private market investor would. Mass Housing will bundle the funds with their funds, do all the legal documentation, do the fund management over the course of the investment. They have lots of experience with that. They have thousands and thousands of units in Massachusetts under management. And then at any sale or refinance, that's when the money, the return back to the city is due, and it returns to the fund at that time.
And if I can just add, Councilor, the basic thing is that all of these transactions are going to be written with a whole bunch of binding legal documents that require disbursements and everything to be sent. And there's as Devin said, Mass Housing has a whole compliance department. Mass Housing is an entity that separately lends money to BHA and others on various rehab deals that we do, and we are constantly sending required things to their compliance department. It's one of the big advantages of that partnership is that we get to piggyback on that existing infrastructure without standing it up. So this is not a case of will someone in the city remember to call somebody and ask them to send the check? It's very much a extremely legally binding contractual relationship that we have here.
Okay, and so Mass Housing will be getting we'll have this fund.
Yeah.
And there'll be a folder somewhere, it may be virtually, but with our money in it, so we can, and the idea is are we expecting to have 4 or 5% more than 110 million in 10 years? How does it, I can't remember Montgomery, how they expected this to grow. And I guess also if you can comment on, I feel like ours is slightly different than Montgomery, where they issued bonds to begin it. I don't think they put the money in from free cash. If you have anything to say.
That's right. So in Montgomery, they didn't have that budgetary fund balance that the CFO spoke to, and so they had to bond for the money. It actually means it's a better deal for us because they bonded, which means they're paying the interest on the bonds in order to get the money up front. So they had to factor that into their cost of capital. Whereas in our case, because we're able to do this as an appropriation, it's the city, you don't have to take, if they're going to make 4 to 6%, they have to think, okay, I'm spending 2 to 3% on paying the bonds. We don't have that deduct. So the city investment is better in this position.
Ruben's nodding his head, yes.
And then I would just say that with these 3 different models, probably exactly how you structure when the monies come back will be a little bit different in each. Sheila referenced the fact that homeownership projects don't have anything to send you until they sell the buildings, but then they have it all at once. Whereas for rental projects, you usually agree to some kind of schedule of payments in which they're going to start paying you, but then it's going to be over a longer period of time. So whether you're getting some of it right very early, some of it over 5 years, some of it over 10, it's probably going to be a mix.
Okay, and I feel like I'm obligated to ask this question now at every hearing, but if for every different topic, but the incoming administration, my sense is we're worried about how that's going to impact funding of housing. Is there any issues with this fund, with the administration and the White House and their feelings toward mixed income housing and low income housing?
I think I see this fund as partly us taking matters into our own hands. It is about what mechanisms can we have at the city and state level that are not dependent on the administration. I mentioned, for instance, that at Charlestown, it's quite important that we're trying to figure out how to get this replacement housing done without being in the infinite tax credit pipeline. The tax credits are an area that we're totally reliant on in most of low-income housing development, and we're very, concerned about what the future of that is not that I don't think that the incoming administration would get rid of the program, but there's been a lot of pressure for expansion of the program. And, maybe there's an outside chance that the tax bill they're planning for this year could include an expansion of that program, but I wouldn't bet a lot of money on that. So I think to us, it's more that this is a way of having a line of housing investment that isn't dependent on them.
And I would just add that if the council sees fit to vote in favor of this proposal and makes this money available, we, as Ruben mentioned in his timeline, should be in a position to be able to make funding commitments by around May, and then that money is then committed. And so that we want to act fast and invest this quickly. Again, the money is not affected by the federal level administration. This is our money, and we can deploy it as we see fit.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. The floor is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. First, I'd like to thank the residents for being here and sharing your personal stories. And when you talked about your grandchildren, so I assume it's your son's children, right? But you know, that their moms aren't sure that their kids are safe, right? I mean, to me, that's criminal. And when we're talking about improvements, and I've been in several BHA units across the city, and we're not just talking about fresh paint or, you know, a new stove or new windows. We're talking, like I said, cockroaches, mice, you know, health issues, real health issues. So to me, we should be spending all of our money in the city. We shouldn't care if we're getting an investment back. We should be making sure that people living in BHA housing in Charlestown and in all 22 neighborhoods across the city have, you know, just basic even would be nice, but we know. So obviously in favor of this, but obviously we also have to talk about where the money's coming from and why. So I mean, my biggest question is, maybe it's political, maybe not, but why did we combine all three? Like, why didn't we come here with three different investment? You know, is it 36.6 million for each? Is it some for, like, why did we have to combine the three? Why couldn't we have asked to use this investment strategy for BHA housing? And if it works, hopefully we could duplicate that, you know, replicate that across the city, because as you know, Kenzie, it's needed in almost all. There's a few that have been recently updated, but most of our BHA housing needs a lot of investment.
Yeah, and Ashley knows that I would take all her money if I could.
But it's our
Counselor.
money, right? It's
Right.
the residents' money. It's the city's money. And we had the elevator hearing, and it's just heartbreaking that people, you know, they urinate on themselves in a hallway, and they can't get their medicine on the first floor, right? I mean, it's just a different level of struggling to live than at least everyone I can say on this side of the chamber live with, even though we all have our own struggles, but it's just a different level. And we talk about, you know, us being the most progressive city in the country, where, you know, we have a mayor, the most progressive mayor, and we're investing all this money, but then we still hear story after story of our most vulnerable residents not being able to even live in dignity. But then we're also spending hundreds of millions. I mean, the others have value, right? So my questions about home ownership and others are important too, but why are we not making sure that the basics are being met first?
So two comments on that, Councillor. One is just to say that I do think I would be remiss not to acknowledge that the mayor and the council in the last few years have really massively increased the support to the Boston Housing Authority. I mean, at this point it's about $200 million in the 5-year capital budget, whereas for 6 years ago that was zero. So I just because our need is so great, it's like you say, there's always more need, but it is a huge thing. And when I think about an example of what you're talking about is the $50 million that was put in the capital budget for Mildred Haley to just do straight modernization, right? Mm-hmm. To your point, that's not an investment. We won't get it back, but we will get it back in terms of the impact for the residents.
The children can sleep at night.
Exactly.
The lights are working when you need to do your homework with your student, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it 100% probably has way more of a financial investment back, because all of these other departments, and we're trying to codify all of these different, offices that we're creating, that we wouldn't need to have these offices even created if we were all making sure that people had the basic living needs.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate your advocacy for us. I think that in terms of this question of why not 3 appropriations, I'll just say that because so right now, for example, we have this problem with these many tens of thousands of units, even on the private side, that are stuck, right? And so the opportunity to get some of them to actually happen with this type of investment partnered with Mass Housing it's a need right now, and the opportunity to also compel those projects to come up to 20% affordability because they need that to access these funds that's like a good opportunity now. You could imagine a situation where 5 years from now, as money's starting to come back, the market's moving fine, those units are happening, but we really want to, we've seen like, oh, the BHA project was successful, and now we really want to focus these monies more on mixed income buildings at, you know, Mary Ellen McCormick and Charlestown and maybe other sites, and maybe part of our goals we're adding middle income housing and such. If you have 3 different appropriations with 3 different like sub-purposes, you can't move the returns from the mass housing into funding that future.
So you'll be able to use some money back. Okay.
Right, so you have that
That's a
flexibility.
good answer. Okay. On the homeownership, did you say of the 804 home buyers, well, that some of them buy outside of the city?
Those 804 bought in the city of Boston.
Those were-
I'm only recording those. I think
Okay.
Kenzie mentioned that.
Kenzie had mentioned something that some of
Yeah,
them-
we have a very small number of the BHA homeowners who have bought outside the city, but then they don't get the city funded down payment assistance.
They don't get both.
Right.
They get-
So, but they could use, for instance, some of them might have used some of the state money that was available, and then also the Section 8 to homeownership program, because it's a federal program. Like, you can use that anywhere. So but it's a very small number. We've actually been really pleased at the fact that all but 6 have bought in Boston.
And one last question. Of the 804, can we get a list of those and also their neighborhood just to see? Not where they're buying, but where they currently live, to know.
We can certainly get a list of where they've bought, Counselor, if that would be helpful, like what neighborhood?
No, where they bought. Where did they live while they were applying?
Oh, yeah.
Before they bought.
Yeah,
To
like
know
neighborhood
which
to.
neighborhoods were
Yeah.
actually.
Sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Sure, like how many, like if you were a renter in Dorchester and you were
Right.
able to buy in Dorchester.
Yeah.
Yep,
And
sure.
maybe you went from Dorchester to Dorchester,
Yep,
but maybe
yep.
you went from, you know.
We can do that.
Right, yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Council Durkin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I just want to thank you particularly for your advocacy on this issue. I think I was asked by a developer recently who are the top pro-housing counselors in the council, and I listed you because I just want to thank you for all of your work. I think we all understand how important it is to actually drive housing production, to on-stick the gears of our current economic situation. And I just think this is such an amazing opportunity for us to describe the issue. It's complicated, but then there's a lot of factors, but in this solution we have like something pretty simple, so I'm excited to vote to authorize it. I don't want to take too much of your time, but one of my questions is about the state evaluation piece and sort of how we're partnering. I think a couple people have asked questions about this. How does that aid us in making sure that our investments are in alignment and also that we're getting the most out of our investments?
Well, thanks for that question, Councilor. So we're actually really pleased that the state and the city are very much aligned in sort of putting our values front and center.
And we have to thank Lieutenant Governor Driscoll for that.
Absolutely.
I know she's been incredible.
100%. And so the state is going to start by just looking at the underwriting. Can a project perform the way that they say? So that's looking deeply into the financials of a project and sort of who's investing and sort of the experience of the development team to actually deliver what is being proposed. And of course, also hitting that 20% affordability threshold, which is a statutory requirement for these projects. So once they have completed that piece, they're really looking to the city to provide advice on some of the other components that we brought up: the diversity of the team, the climate resilience, some of the community impact, the community and political support behind projects, and all those factors will go in after they do that first piece, the affordability and the readiness underwriting. They'll provide us sort of a list of what has qualified under those, and then we'll work with them on advising sort of how the other criteria are looking and how to evaluate those.
Thank you. And how do we evaluate shovel ready? Can you tell me a little more about what that means to the
Well,
city?
a lot of it has to do with how close are they to getting a permit. Do they have their construction documents ready? Have they gone through, or are they preparing to go through design review? Have they lined up all of the various city approvals? Have they put their internal, as their architects figured out all the details of the project? There are all those pieces that sort of speak to the state that they're able to work through to determine is a project, some projects they have told us, this one is probably 2 years away. This other one could be 3 months away. And they were able to really make those determinations based on what they review from what applicants have submitted.
And then I was just curious, like, what's the deal for reinvestment? And sorry, Administrator Buck, I'll let you answer that.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that, just piggybacking on Ruben, that also obviously, like, their actual readiness is a condition of receiving the money. Like, it's not just that someone says, oh, I think I could have a shovel in the ground. It's like, if they can't actually perform because the whole point of this is to move things now, then like they wouldn't get the money. So that's like a very real kind of like, has to be true condition.
So you're into the nitty gritty around like construction timelines and just, okay, you're starting on, this date.
When you're getting a permit, you're pulling the permit,
Yes.
which requires a fee to the city of a certain amount. So at that point, we see that a project is much more ready when they're ready to pull that permit.
Got it. Okay. And then I just wanted to talk about a little bit this, because obviously the idea of why we're taking from free cash is that free cash would be replaced and reinvested. I know you described this in a more complicated way, like how can we simply, like when would this money be available again for the next project?
Yeah, so it would come back. That's what I was saying, was that in some of the projects, like the home ownership projects, it'll come back all at once, right? And in some of the rental projects, it might be that the lion's share comes back all at once at a moment of takeout financing, but you may well have an agreement where you get like incremental part of the loan being paid back along the way. So, or I should say the returns.
So depending on the agreements, it may look very different depending on the project.
And so it wouldn't necessarily be a one-to-one of like, oh, we invest in one project, we wait 5 or 10 years and it all comes back and we invest in another. It might be like we've invested in 5 projects and they're each sending us back a bit, and at some point we have enough that there's enough to invest in another project, right? And of course, like fundamentally, the city's gonna have to ask the question at that juncture of like, is this money that we can afford to invest in another project, or if something crazy's happened in the world and we need that money for something else, that the city's still got that ability to decide.
And I just want to end with this. I think expending political capital to bend the cost curve down on housing is a public good, so we should be doing everything we can to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Again, thank you to the administration for testifying and all your hard work. Also, just want to thank past administrations and this current administration for being fiscal responsible to putting us in this position to be innovative and creative and to solve some of the housing production problems that we face today. I do have a few questions. One of my questions is to Administrator Bach. You talked about the ability to return around the BHA sites. Can you, I didn't hear the full explanation, but I think Councilor Mejia was asking a question on is everyone able to stay at the site, but I think you were talking about the ability to return. Was that like people who moved out of the city are now able to come back, or?
Sorry, no, so that was so I mentioned that one of the things we're trying to do is maximize one-way moves where people never have to leave the site, so we just build the new unit and they get to move from an old unit into a new unit. But a certain proportion of people will have to temporarily relocate because just of the math of, which buildings do you knock down and then how many units do you build back and stuff. And so that's where anybody who moved off site in the, in order, for instance, for building M to be built, right? Like a lot of those people are now moving back to the site. But people actually get a formal letter. It's governed by the Uniform Relocation Act. It's a whole set of federal rules around, like, they get a formal letter from us that really enshrines their right to return.
Awesome. And then for CFO Grafenberger, what type of fund will the fund currently sit in? Because right now it's not a revolving fund. And then when it does become a revolving fund, where would it sit?
So right now our cash is invested across a number of different type of investment vehicles. So it would be sort of invested, kind of in different, types of mechanisms and treasuries and other types of things. We have a very diverse investment portfolio. So that's where our cash would sit currently. The way this will work is pretty similarly. So if you approve this, we will appropriate the funds. We will transfer those funds to the Boston Housing Authority that will sort of administer the Accelerator Fund. And so when those funds are not actively invested in a project, they will similarly, the way we would be investing them in typical investment vehicles, the Boston Housing Authority will invest those. They'll earn some return. So that's where they'll sort of sit if they are not actively invested in a project.
Awesome. And then the term stuck got brought up a few times. Who does that analysis, and what does the term stuck mean?
I think...
I know what it means, but give me some details. Yeah.
I think what we're referencing is the over 25,000 units of housing that have been fully approved through the BPDA Board and the Planning Department.
Yep.
Meaning that if you've approved it, it's a project that we would like to see built, and they have not started construction. And a significant portion of those have not started construction because of financing challenges, and this program is meant to address those financing challenges.
Got it. And who will be responsible for the analysis of those finances?
So that's mass housing. So that, going back to what Ruben was explaining earlier, they're going to look at, but is this dollar a but-for dollar? If we give you this dollar, are you ready to move into construction?
All right. Two more questions. For the private investment side, is this solely for residential, or can it be for a project that has residential and commercial?
Yeah, it can be mixed use, especially if there's like ground floor retail or something like that. These funds are eligible for that, for a project of that sort.
Got it. Thank you. And then last question is, I know Council Weber brought this up around bonding, but in the future, is that something that we would explore? I kind of heard that maybe it won't be as attractive to developers, but down the road, with bonding against the returns on this fund be something that the city would explore?
Great question. I think we need to look at that a little bit more closely. I think also there is the element of what we can and cannot bond for through ourselves. So can certainly think about that, but I think at this point, did you want to chime in?
Well, I just wanted to say, this has come up kind of in a funny way through the last 5 years of conversation about whether we should bond on CPA, because CPA also has a bonding mechanism. And I think what's been found there is that because the city of Boston's base is so big, we just get a better general obligation bond rate off of kind of our whole base than we get off of a specific smaller pool of money. Whereas for a smaller town saying oh, we're going to have $30 million of CPA in the next 5 years, that's it's a bigger pool than they have otherwise. So it creates this bonding potential. But for us, we're so big that we're not getting as good of a rate as we would get ourselves. So I think that's what's caused us not to really take up the bonding on the CPA side. And my guess is that would be similar here, where even though it would be a secured form of revenue, you have such a better secured form of revenue in the form of the city that you're probably better off just direct investing those dollars back instead of bonding against them.
All right, awesome. Thank you. I want to go to my council colleagues with any second question, but we'll go to public testimony first. We have two people on public testimony. When you hear your name is called, please state your name, any affiliations, your address, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. We have Rosemary Marceo. The floor is now yours. Okay, we'll move now to Diane Valley. Diane, the floor is now yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Rosemary's with me. She can testify when I'm done, so if that's fine with you. I want to thank Chair Brian Morrill and the City Councilors for this opportunity to speak. Before I begin, I'd like to say that I've done a lot of transactions in retail real estate, and the terms, the amount of money, who's qualified, and what's going to happen with that money are always clearly defined before money transfers. And I'm shocked at the amount of confusion that we all have regarding this process. And I'm very concerned about it because this is just another example of the City of Boston not having transparency or accountability or true valid community engagement. And I'm very, very concerned that this administration has abandoned all efforts which they ran on, which was to abolish the BPDA. So I am opposed to the $110 million accelerator fund to the Bunker Hill housing development, and I am opposed to it for a number of reasons. One, this project was supposed to be like Harbor Point. It is not like Harbor Point in any way, shape, or form. And this will be the destruction of 288 mature, almost century-old trees. This is an environmental, social, and economic injustice. You only heard from the board members who are actually paid by the developer. You don't hear from anybody who is living there because people are living there in fear. They don't want to be evicted. This process denied and ignored community engagement and input, especially during COVID. There was no community engagement. I'm really concerned about the Mayor's Office of Housing because we have for the past 2 decades built luxury residences without any affordable housing in the Seaport and downtown, in North Station, 2 Millennium Towers, the Four Seasons, Raffles, St. Regis, 2 Liberty buildings in Echelon, plus many, many other buildings that are suitable for wealthy Bostonians, but not for most. I'm also concerned that we have built so many dorms and nobody has addressed that. So what I'm really concerned about is this is the very first time in the history of Boston that public housing has partnered with private equity. And as I said to the former director of the Boston Housing Authority, don't you usually experiment on mice before you experiment on the human? And this is the 4th largest housing development in the country. And so public housing is intended to foster sustainable communities and provide stability, opportunity, and peace of mind for the public. But today does not give me any of that idea that this is in play. And private equity is based on driving long-term value for shareholders and their investors. I'm really concerned because phase 1 segregates low-income people. And they are only low-income residents in phase 1 in a massive heat island with the destructions of trees, no usable green space, when this was supposed to be a mixed income housing. I really hope that in fact that what I believe it was Kenzie Bach testified that the tenants will not be paying their utility costs because electric utility costs for heat and air conditioning, lighting, cooking, and laundry is what is included in their current rates. And I've talked to the residents themselves that do not have the ability to pay it, and so it will self-select the very residents who thought they were going to live there. So I hope that that will be something that will come through. And these buildings are massive. This summer, when it was 99 degrees out there, it was 125 degrees on that site because there's no tree canopy. And what's most egregious about this project is this developer was awarded this designation because they said that they would take no public funds. And then shortly after, Mayor Walsh allocated $30 million
Thank you.
and $110 million of public funds.
Thank you.
Is not supposed to go here. So I'll pass this on to Rosemary and she can testify. My written testimony is on record.
Thank you.
Councilors, thank you very much. This is Rosemary Massaro. I'm seated with Diane Valley. I appreciate an opportunity to speak. I live in Charlestown. I'm a recent resident of the city, and I have to say that I find it really offensive as a taxpayer when the chief financial person refers to my taxpayer dollars as free cash. It's not free cash, it's taxpayer dollars. And care should be spent before allocating taxpayer dollars to private equity developers like Liggett McCall to incentivize them to build a project that they were already under contract to construct. Now, I don't think any money should be allocated to that because there is a legally binding contract that demands that these people construct the Bunker Hill housing development. I also am extremely concerned that the Boston Housing Authority apparently has not maintained its buildings and it's allowing its residents to live in such deplorable conditions. And that suggests to me that that we have a much more endemic problem in the city, and that is that the Boston Housing Authority does not know how to keep and maintain property. And so if every time the Boston Housing Authority doesn't keep and maintain its property, we take free cash, which is not free, which is my tax dollars, as are your tax dollars and other homeowners' tax dollars, especially in this year where the mayor has refused to cut the budget and just dedicates them to private development, instead of making sure that this housing stock that is owned by the Boston Housing Authority is properly maintained. I find that very problematic. I want to know exactly how much money is going from city funds, it's not free cash, city funds, taxpayer funds, into this acceleration of the Bunker Hill housing. And that question has not been satisfactorily answered, although I want to thank Councilor Flynn for asking the question. I also would like to know how much money is being matched by the state, and I also want to know who is dispensing the money, how it's going to be dispensed, and where the documents are going to be, and if they're going to be available for public review and inspection. I have significant concerns about taking money which is not free cash and putting it into the future. I think this should have been done through bonding, which is the customary way to fund any type of public investment. Further, I think that we need to know the specifics on those other mechanisms for private home ownership, which I think is a great idea, but I firmly think that the reason that these are all mixed together is because there is a lack of transparency here of the people that are going to run this program, and that deeply concerns me. I would also like to point out that we have been in a housing crisis since 1987, and Ms. Dillon, who is there with us, controls a large amount of funds that are being exacted under a city ordinance from public developers that build large buildings. I want to know why the money is not coming out of the Mayor's Office of Housing, since this has to do specifically with housing. That's where the money should be coming from.
Thank you, Rosemary.
I'm going to thank you very much for the time to speak today, but there are serious concerns that we as citizens have, and it's up to you people as city councilors to get answers to our questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll go back to my council colleagues. If you have any second round questions for the administration, please put on your light. Councilor Mejia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I just want to thank the administration, and I really do appreciate your indulgence in being here a little bit later than what you probably anticipated. So I know we have a second panel coming, so I'll be quick. I think that it's important for us to just read the Zoom or the room that we happen to be in. It's just that I think that there's a level of frustration because oftentimes when we find ourselves in situations where we are able to help support low-income people, there's always this urgency, right? And then there's this narrative that the only way for you all to have the housing that you need is if we do X. And then what happens is that situations like this present themselves, and then it becomes a pitting developers against poor people, against, it just becomes a hot mess, if you really want to be honest, right? And I think that what is happening here is that you all who have come here to testify know that a lot of what you are hoping for and the type of quality of life that you know that you deserve is also riding on this particular project, right? Because if you don't get the funding, then obviously it's going to be a lot harder for you to have the quality of life that you deserve, correct? We know this, right? And because of this, this is the way, right, in which we govern and the way that we talk about co-governance. Because what happens is that we create this type of dynamic that the only pathway forward is in ways that make oftentimes people feel like other folks are winning at the cost of your benefit. And I'm looking at the residents that are here because that is kind of, if you want to like break it down, that is what's happening here. And why there's so much concern is because at the end of the day, who tends to benefit from this ultimately is the big question that I have, right? We already understand that if we approve this project, the folks from Charlestown will have a beautiful quality of life, but who else wins here? And I think that that is one of the questions that a lot of folks who have been emailing our office don't trust us because they think that there is another layer of benefit that we're not being explicit about. And I think it's important for us, as we continue to have these conversations, to just lay it out here in this environment that we're in so that we can address the elephant in the room. Who else is going to benefit from a project such as this? We already know the outcome and quality of life for those folks that we serve, and those are my only one priority. But I'm just curious, out of the sense of this exercise, can we, for the record, who are the other stakeholders that are going to benefit from this project?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. I appreciate you asking it for transparency's sake. And I think that it's diverse in many, I think, is part of the answer. So I would, and just sort of like starting from the beginning, I would think about the construction workers who are not able to be employed in working on the project that wouldn't otherwise happen if we didn't actually
And are those folks going to be Black-owned, minority-owned? Like, I want, if we're going to go to like, who are we here to serve? I want to hear those things on the record to make sure that we are going to get to where we need to be. Because anybody else wants to fight me on this particular issue, I want to make sure that I have some really good talking points to be able to stand on it.
Absolutely, and I think that goes back to the evaluation question that's been asked pretty thoroughly here around how are we choosing who gets this investment, who doesn't. Well, it's the projects that are doing the most for climate resilience, the projects that are doing the most for community impact, and then to your point, the projects that are doing the most for diversifying the real estate industry is where we would prioritize our investment. So certainly certainly construction workers, certainly the residents of both the affordable units in the VHA projects, the affordable units in the market rate projects, but also the residents in the market rate units that currently can't find a home. Those, they benefit as well.
Okay.
And I would say broadly the residents of Boston overall from the completion of the project.
You get one more question.
I got more questions.
You go to a third round, but you get do one more question.
I can do one more question, but I got more questions because you know what? I'm here to do my job. So one more question, then I'm going to come back for a third round out of respect for the process here. I'm just curious because what I have seen is that when we have projects like this, people who are poor, right, they are unable to enjoy some of the benefits. When we're talking about mixed income housing, there are developments right now in the city of Boston where poor people aren't able to ride their bikes on certain sides of certain developments, even though it's supposed to be mixed use. So I'm curious, as we continue to have these conversations, what types of guardrails are we going to put in to make sure that the BHA residents don't feel like third-class citizens?
Yeah, that's a really important point, and it's actually a big part of the reason that we've built this tri-party agreement, which is a contractual obligation on the development around like really giving the CRA a seat at the table. And specifically, we've been very specific actually about the fact that like any of those amenities need to be open to all. There's a community center where actually like one of the reasons that the CRA is getting a stream of resources as the development happens is in order to fund programming targeted at our residents in that community center, so that it's really like first and foremost their space, even though it will serve the wider community. And you know, we've got, I mean, we can provide the sort of maps of the space, but there's like active and more passive like outdoor space, to your point, and everybody's access to that is like protected in this kind of, it's something called an owners association agreement that then makes reference to the tri-party agreement. And so it's a whole set. I mentioned at the start, but our friends at Greater Boston Legal Services have been a big help to us. And I will say that we are routinely like receiving inquiries from the rest of the country of people saying, hey, I hear that you guys have really set this up in a way where the residents have a long-term seat at the table. How can we copy that?
All right, so my time is up, and I want to be respectful before I get kicked out of here, so I'll be quiet.
Councilor Coletta Zapata, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair, and I'm just so excited that this conversation is happening in a public forum because it illuminates the almost 10 years worth of work embedding in protections and empowerment of residents. So I'm really excited that we get a chance to talk about it, and my colleagues are grasping the full scope of exactly the work that had taken place over the last, again, 10 years. There was a question or comment that was made about denying community engagement. I just want to say that I think that that's a misclassification of the entire process. There were dozens of in-person meetings before, during, and after COVID. I think there was over 100 in-person charrettes that included the CRA and multiple people in the community. There were also a couple of city council hearings that happened in Charlestown at the Knights of Columbus, where everybody's voice was taken into consideration and brought to the table. So I just wanted to say that. I have two questions. And because this was also brought up in some of the comments, is there a stipulation in the contract that says that there is going to be public support for this project? Because people keep talking about, oh, well, this was supposed to be Harbor Point, whatever. Is there a stipulation in the contract, in the final contract, that says there will be public support? Yeah, so in the development agreement that the BHA signed on this, it assumed public support, and there was, as has been referenced, $30 million that helped with the infrastructure work on that first site and clearing the second site and some of the other kind of core infrastructure work. I really want to emphasize that Harbor Point is not a good comparison, because in Harbor Point, which is, for folks' reference, one of the original redevelopments of public housing in the country, we lost deeply affordable units. We massively reduced them, right? There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of public housing units that were never replaced for low-income families, and only a fractional number of low-income families got to return to Harbor Point. We RFP'd on this site with the absolute bedrock value that we are replacing every unit of deeply affordable housing, and when you do that, it does burden the project more, right? There isn't as much profitability in the project if you say, hey, I also want to produce a whole bunch of deeply affordable, but still brand new and at the same quality and with these same amenities units. That is a cost. But we think it's a cost that these projects should absolutely be bearing. But it does mean that the relationship between the public and the private has to be different than at Harbor Point, where it was yeah, no worries, just demolish a whole bunch of deeply affordable apartments and don't replace them. There's always going to be more money for the private side in that. Thank you. Sorry, and I appreciate that answer, Administrator Bach. This is for Chief Dillon. I'm interested to hear about the RFP with the homeownership piece and underwriting. I understand that Mass Housing has this robust underwriting apparatus. But the city and the mayor's office does not have that, and so I know that we will have to contract with somebody to do this work. At what point will that happen, and then also how much do we think that that's going to cost us?
Yeah, so very good question, right? I think if we had our druthers, we'd continue to work with Mass Housing, but they're not providing construction loans, and so we are going to have to RFP. We are going to be looking for a financial institution, probably that we know and already feel very, very good about, that they know Boston. Mm-hmm. And I would certainly want to see that they were also going to make funds available, that they were construction lenders now, so we could leverage, using our lower cost capital, we could leverage larger construction loan pools. I'm assuming that if the City Council approves this, and the funds are available, that we will immediately put out an RFP, advertise it widely, really make sure that we're getting a lot of good responses, so that we can evaluate and pick someone we feel very, very comfortable with.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to also just let the panel be aware that I will be submitting Councilor Braden's questions. So if you could respond back to them in written form. Her questions revolve around administration of the program, eligibility and project selection, affordability standards, addressing potential delays, and revolving fund model. One of the questions that I have is I would love to see a reporting, annual report of, what projects, we invested in, how we were able to meet some of the goals that were outlined, the affordability goals, the BRJP compliance goal, the diversity, just to make sure that it's in line, right? That we're staying in line with the values of the city and of this council and of the people of Boston.
We fully agree with you, Councilor. We intend to have an annual report. We want this program to be transparent. We understand this is a lot of money that we're asking of the city to invest, and we want to make sure that people have confidence in what we're investing in, understand the projects, understand the details of those projects, exactly the things that you shared and more. And so that will be part of the program, is making sure that we create that annual reporting structure.
Thank you. I'll go to my council colleagues for third round of questions, and then we're going to move on to the second panel. Councilman Mejia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I guess, it's important to just kind of ask these questions, because at the end of the day, these are the things that people are actually really thinking, but they just don't know how to articulate it, or they don't have the privilege of being here to speak for themselves. So I'm not apologizing. I'm just naming it that somebody got to ask these questions. I'm curious about kind of the criteria and the metrics that you all discussed, like for future projects, when you do this, what lessons will you learn, will you share, how you, what's your metrics for like evolving and doing things differently based on the lessons that you learned this go around?
That's another great question, Councilor. So I think as we're thinking, right now what we're engaged in is a sort of a process of funneling in terms of who we're going to invest in, because there's a large universe out there, as Councilor Well asked about stuck projects. There's a large number of stuck projects, but only a relatively small number of those could move forward tomorrow with this money. And in a smaller amount of those are ones where that is a safe investment based on Mass Housing's underwriting. And then what remains is a group of projects that are safe investments that will start into construction, but that they meet our values. So I think what we'll learn through that funneling process is what's those projects that rise at the top should be the best projects on those metrics. Mm-hmm. And those should help inform future policy efforts to get more projects like that built in the city.
And I'd like to see, as part of that reflection exercise, is that I think community voice is really important in terms of kind of like their journey on this. Alongside, it would be great to hear from those stakeholders. But this is the $1 million question, or the $100 million question. How much is it? The only way that you all are going to be able to do this investment for BHA, Charlestown, the Bunker Hill project, the only way you're going to be able to do it is if you get this money? Is this it?
Yeah, we have
So this is how we're working.
We have been waiting for the normal course of real estate investment to work. And because of where interest rates are, it's just not happening.
Okay, so that everybody's really clear that the only path forward towards helping to support Charlestown residents who are looking for this initiative is for the city council to approve this particular one time. So then here's my thing. I don't mind making an investment, right? But I just think it's really important for those folks who are tuning in to understand what you're asking us to do, because ultimately the city councilors are the ones who have to approve budgets, right? And we are the ones that then everybody, it's great when the mayor does it, but we're the ones who have to approve it, right, at the end of the day. And whatever decisions we make, we're the ones who have to be held accountable for those decisions, whether they're good or bad. So if we don't approve it, then Charlestown residents are going to think, oh, y'all don't care about us, right? But if we do approve it, then folks are thinking that we're not being fiscally responsible. So I hope people who are tuning in understand how difficult it is for us to be in these sort of situations. Because if we do support this initiative, what I am going to need is a very clear, outlined, written memo of what lessons we're going to learn and how we're going to make sure that we continue to move with equity, and equity, not just racial equity. I'm talking about low income, folks who are poor, equity, okay? Because sometimes we get lost with what equity is, and I'm talking about poor people here. So for the record, that's who I'm referring to right now. I would like to make sure that as part of this appropriation, before we approve this budget, that there needs to be something in writing that demonstrates the city's responsibility in moving forward with centering poor people first and not mixed income. Because for me, while I understand housing crisis is a housing crisis and everybody's in it, but the people who are at the bottom are the ones who are impacted the most. So I want to know how this accelerator fund is going to support those who are at the lowest and not mixed use.
I think you're driving home a very important point around transparency and ensuring that we're learning our lessons and showing where this money is going. And to that effect, and also to the chair's request, I think we would be very, very comfortable and probably, honestly, we're grateful for the council to layer on the requirement for us to report annually on the use of these funds. That seems like a very good opportunity for us to credibly show that this investment's going to the right place and that we're getting stronger over time, and to make it a not an option, but an obligation of the administration to report back to the council on those matters. So I'd be happy to endorse that.
I know, I hear you, but what I need to hear, what will make me feel more comfortable in supporting this particular appropriation, right? Because ultimately my votes matter, even though the votes have already been taken and you're gonna get your appropriation whether I vote yes or no. We already know how this works. But my thing is that I wanna make sure that in the future, right, there is a deep commitment to not just mixed use housing. Because if you're coming here asking us to appropriate $110 million in the name of helping Charlestown and people who are living in poverty, then I think this whole mixed use situation makes me wonder who it is that I'm really fighting for. So what I'm trying to understand is in the next iteration of the situation, because Boston needs to be a city where everyone feels like they can live in. But the people who can't stay here are the people who are the poorest. So I want to hear from you all around this $110 million. How is that going to support our lowest income residents? That's what I'm trying to understand, because I'm not going to support something unless I have that assurance that moving forward, we know who we're here to fight for. Because we're not going to utilize...
Thank you. No, it's
I just want to hear from them.
The counselor is having a question to the administration.
I just need to hear it.
Yeah, I think that like what's incredibly important to understand here in terms of what's the like long-term investment in low-income folks.
Yeah.
Right now, nothing about how the private investment in real estate production works helps provide housing for really low-income people, right? Because the reality is that like even when we're talking about IDP units, really low-income people need a deeper level of affordability than those provide, and the only way that that gets financed is if people are using our vouchers, right? Like you don't see that happen through the private mechanism. So what's incredibly appealing about this fund, not just in terms of this first building, but in terms of the potential, is the idea that like if the public can be in the business of financing housing production, then the public can be in the business of calling the shots, right? Mm-hmm. And like one of the things that Montgomery has seen, because they're like a few steps ahead of us where they did their first building, but now they're like on their fifth building that they're financing. And what they're seeing is they're getting to take projects that when they had been conceived of on the private side were maybe 10% affordable and turn them into like 40% affordable, right? And like you're able to put middle income units in, you're able to do deeper, because fundamentally you change the project math from being about how do I get the maximum profit for a real estate investment trust to just how do I make this pencil, right? Like even the public side has to make it pencil because the you have to get the money back for it to be a revolving thing. Mm-hmm. But like it's a very different bar than if you're trying to make a whole bunch of private folks a profit. So like to me, when I think about like what's my hope for like where this goes in the long term, it would be that we would actually have this public muscle where we got to build the housing that we wanted to build that reflected our communities, so that we weren't just building like only the housing that the private side will let us build because it suits their profit margins.
Right. And I appreciate that. And I'm so glad that we got that on the record, because I think it's really important for people to hear it. And then I also think it's important for us to put that in writing. Devin, I think it would be great.
Absolutely.
I think that because people don't trust government, the more that we can put in writing, the better it will make us all feel if
And
you
to
can lay
just
that out. So
make
thank
it
you. I
completely-
appreciate the indulgence.
It's
Thank
totally unambiguous. Everyone on this panel comes to work every day to help those who need our help the most first, and that's entirely why the BHA project will be the first project funded through this fund. So yes, we're happy to do it in writing and happy to say it affirmatively
Thank
here.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for all your work around housing. Now we'll go to the second panel. On our second panel will be Dariella Villon-Maga, President and Founder of DVM Housing Partners. The show is yours. The floor is now yours.
I'm not sure if we, okay, awesome. Do I get to use the clicker?
Can we have it? Give her 1
Okay.
second.
No, I'm alone.
She,
No. What it
okay.
looks like on this side?
So,
Okay, let's see.
Ms. Villon-Maga, just say next, because they're going to have to do it on their end
Awesome.
in order to go through the slides.
Oh, my slides are small. All right, I'm gonna pull them up here. Give me 1 sec. I just want to make sure I can see.
We have a copy here for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. So Dariella Villon-Maga here of DVM Housing Partners. We are a Roxbury-based affordable housing development firm and an affirmative marketing firm that focuses strictly on income-restricted housing. Here today to advocate for home ownership funds to be prioritized as part of this fund. I think I've shared with this council numerous times the need for us as a city and as a state to continue to be creative when it comes to funding affordable home ownership. Massachusetts, it's one of few states with a home ownership subsidy. The city of Boston has made strides in this space in our history, and I think we should continue to be pioneers in this space. A lot of, through the work, both through building and through our lottery services, we get to touch residents at different levels of the development process. Through our lottery work, we intimately get to know the financial circumstances of the families in Boston and in Greater Boston that are applying for the housing that we're building or our partners are building. I think it's important for the council and for the city to get a better understanding of the profile of the families and individuals that are qualifying for affordable homeownership, and for our residents to also understand who qualifies for affordable homeownership. We've completed in the last 2 years 3 different lotteries in Boston for different affordable homeownership projects. In Nubian Square, we finished and sold 40 units of affordable homeownership, and we received 883 applications. For a project that we're currently selling out in Jamaica Plain, 45 units received 1,008 applicants. So the need is there, the demand is there, and a lot of our colleagues, a lot of the workforce needs this opportunity in order to stay in the city. I want to focus today on a project that we sold out over the summer, Sage on Fountain in Roxbury, and just provide a little bit of the statistics so that we get to know the profile of the buyers of this property. Again, Sage was 40 units, 100% affordable. Half of the units were restricted at 80% of AMI, and half of the units were restricted at 100% of AMI. And we had units that ranged from studios to 3 bedrooms. Of the buyers who purchased, 25% were previously from Roxbury, 27.5% were previously from Dorchester. We had 7.5% from Mattapan, 5% from Mission Hill, 5% from Alston Brighton, 2.5% from South Boston, Rosendale, Jamaica Plain, Charlestown. 20% of buyers were non-Boston residents. Next. Sharing a little bit of buyer background. We have over 57% of buyers identifying as Black or African American, 12.5% were Asian, 10% were white, 7.5% were Hispanic, and 12.5% were multiracial. 65% were women, 30% male, and 5% non-binary. Next. I think this is the one that I want to make sure we pay a little bit more attention to. We don't have an ideal profile for affordable homeownership. We have folks all over the spectrum. We have folks from ages 25 all the way to 65 qualifying for this housing. Most of our buyers were between the age of 26 and 29 and 35 and 39 years old. Most of our buyers were healthcare workers, education workers, either in BPS or in universities. We had food and beverage workers, financial health services, banking, public utilities, admin work, childcare services, estheticians, nonprofit workers, pharmaceutical sciences, security services, and technology. So we have folks working pretty much all over the city, both in city, municipal, and non-municipal jobs. Next. Here we tried to break those professions down by the AMI type. So a lot of the folks that qualified for our lower tier were the folks that were working in food, beverage, public utility, et cetera. The higher incomes were those working in BPS and universities for the most part. Next slide. Here we highlight the income ranges for the folks who qualified for this housing. So the lowest income we saw was a one-person household who bought a studio, and their annual income was a little under $45,000. So a single person in the city of Boston would not be able to buy anything on the market making $45,000. So we are creating opportunities for folks that would otherwise not have any. And I think that that's important to the city if we want to stem displacement and continue to make space for people that have been born and raised in the city and have experienced both the good and the bad of development. I want to continue just to highlight here a one-bedroom household that was able to purchase a one-bedroom making $51,000. Again, I would love for someone to give me an example of who in Boston can buy a one-bedroom condo, new construction, making $51,000. Again, we're making opportunities for people that would otherwise not have them. So I say all that to say we're not competing with the market. These are people that would not show up at an open house this weekend. These are people that actually didn't think that homeownership was an option for them. And the only way that we can create housing at this level is to fund subsidy for affordable homeownership. I'll keep going down to a two-bedroom household. That's a single mom with two children with an income of $80,000. She is a paraprofessional at BPS and also works a part-time shift at Cheesecake Factory in Braintree. So we have a single mom with two children working two jobs who never thought she would be able to provide a home that she owned for her children. So I want to provide these examples so that we start thinking about this funding as something that affects humans, not just votes that we're making here on the council floor or decisions that we have to weigh against other potential opportunities for this fund. I think it's important for us to humanize our investment. I think it's important for us to understand who this money is going to affect, and for us to understand that this is one of the best tools that we have to keep our workforce in this city. Our teachers, our food service workers, our Uber drivers, this is one of the only tools that we have for them to be able to achieve homeownership, gain stability, and not be priced out of Boston.
Thank you. And that's why you can hold a panel on your own. I want to turn...
And that was it with 24-hour notice.
I want to turn it over to my council colleagues for any questions, starting with Councilor Coletta Zapata. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. This question is for Councilor Mejia. No, I'm just kidding.
You got to turn your mic on.
I have no questions. I am just, you've impressed me before, and I'm just so grateful for your work here in the city of Boston. Thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia, the floor is yours.
That's right. I'm still counselor, just so you know. I worked really hard. So, I mean, I really don't have any questions for you. You actually wrote my housing policy when I was running for office in 2019. And I put her up against Alex E. Edwards, who was all about development. And I put her up against someone who was homeless once upon a time and was all about subsidized housing. And you were my great equalizer because we had very opposing views. And you were able to help everyone understand kind of what is the possibility. So I just want to say thank you for the way you continue to show up, and thank you for your words of wisdom in this space, because, you know, we're all here for all of it. I don't have any specific questions because too bad the administration has bounced, but...
Kenzie's still here.
Well, I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure if you can bring them back down. I don't know how the summons situation is here, but like... You know, there's 110 million, and how much of the 110 million is being allocated to support affordable home ownership as opposed to the BHA project?
I think in the presentation, I feel like I'm on the panel. In the presentation, I believe there was an estimation between 10 to 15 projects that could be funded in pilot program
10 to 15.
projects.
So that 10, like, so just because, I'm not as sophisticated as most of you are here, but when you say 10 to 15, are you saying 10 to 15 units, 10 to 15, like what does that, for people who aren't paying attention, when you say 10 to 15 projects, that means 10 to 15 units, 10 to 15 homes, 10 to 15 studios.
Right.
People want to understand what it is that we're voting for.
Yes.
So if you have that data, I would really appreciate it.
Yes. So my understanding of a project is what's being built on a site, right? So it could be 30, it could be 40, it could be 50 units, it could be 20 units. So it's all dependable on what that developer is putting on that site. So that's why it will be between 10 and 15, because we don't know what the financing gap will be needed in order to get that project across the finish line.
And so 10 to 15 projects that, let's say, for instance, a developer of color will be able to bid and develop and employ and,
yes,
right? 10 to 15 opportunities.
10 to 15 opportunities that will be out there. But like as the panel, the first panel said, the RFP is going to be put out there for another financial institution to take that on because we don't have.
Yeah, we don't have the power.
Yeah.
Right.
And sorry, I just want to add to that comment. I think it's important that we also try to prioritize projects that have mixed income components or mixed use, right? I think we have a tendency in the housing world to try to prioritize affordable rental over affordable homeownership. And I think I'm here to advocate for there to be some sort of priority on either a percentage of the amount be allocated to affordable homeownership projects or projects that include affordable homeownership as part of their program. I think last time I was here, I was also advocating for the projects that are in the works with BHA or projects that are being scheduled to be deposed to also prioritize affordable homeownership as part of the program. We've had the luck on the lottery we have going now, where we have one applicant that's enrolled in the BHA home buyer voucher program and has a unit under agreement. So she's a mom of 3 and will hopefully be closing on a 3-bedroom in the next 4 months in Jamaica Plain. And I think it's important that we start thinking about the solution to public housing, not just in a way of replacing existing, but also creating a cycle that folks can filter through so that we can make way for more rental units to be available through people accomplishing homeownership.
Right. And I think
And I
you're
just
right.
want you to know this is my session right now.
Oh, my
Don't be
fault.
trying to go back and forth with my time, okay?
I thought you guys were asking. I thought I was on the panel.
I'm teasing you. Okay. Well, I have to say that because people think that I'm really mean, but I was just joking.
No, I
with
know.
you. We got a different
we got it,
relationship,
yes,
so
we're
like
good.
you understand me. Like most people need therapy after I get done with them, but you get me. All right. So I really want to advocate fiercely for this whole idea of the affordable home ownership, because what I don't want is the unintended consequences, because what I've seen is that we keep people in poverty, and I can see like a lot of the BHA residents really want, and they deserve to live in quality housing, and they also deserve opportunities to be able to own something. So I think that this accelerator fund, I don't know when you are going to bring this up for a vote, but I feel like there's still so many more opportunities for us to be innovative in terms of how we put guardrails in, because if this is going to be a one-time investment, we can also think about how we can do this as a one-time opportunity to move people out of poverty.
Right.
And that there is a clear pathway towards both helping to support minority-owned business, developers, while also trying to create as many opportunities for home ownership for existing BHA residents. And I'm sure that Administrator Bach would be really excited to see a program at Charlestown that has a lot, earmarked units that can go from rent to own. Like, I'd love that level of innovation and that level of opportunity. And I'm just curious about, what that looks like.
Right.
And
I think we know that that's possible, right? So through our partnership with Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Development Corporation. We are consulting with them to manage the lottery of their current project in Jamaica Plain. And we've been able to work with the City of Boston and the Boston Fair Housing Commission to give a preference for at least for 2 units for BHA voucher holders. And I think that's the first time. That was the first time that that's been done. So I see that, so we have, now we have a case in which it's been done before, which we can follow in the future. So I'm interested in exploring that further and seeing how we can there's a lot of initiatives that you guys are pushing, right? And I see a lot of synergy, but it's not necessarily always brought together. So for me, affordable housing is like, I eat, sleep, and dream affordable housing. So I'm always thinking about ways that we can have more synergy and be more effective when it comes to actually impacting indivials, right? Not just buildings.
Right.
Yeah.
That was your time.
I was going to say real quick that I would love, I'm sure we're going to have more of hearings on this accelerator fund before we bring it up for a vote. I think we have some time, right? By January 31st is when we have to take a vote, right? Because that's when it was first filed. I think.
I don't have the data
I believe
in front
so,
of me.
but anyways, I still think that we have some time to really think about this, because even if it's just about earmarking, we said 2 in JP, but maybe Charlestown could have maybe 4 units that are set aside for Charlestown residents to be able to be the homeowners of one of those or 4 of those units. I just think like if we're going to give money away, we might as well just try to take as much as we can to help support the people that we're trying to advocate for. And so if we're fighting for more affordable home ownership and opportunities to get people out of poverty, then our job is to make sure that we're utilizing whatever levers we have to fight for those things, because the city can't get the money unless we appropriate it. So if we're in a position of real alleged power, then we might as well ask for the things that we really want to see. Otherwise, it's just a transactional conversation, and I don't want to show up for that. So I want to put it on the record that I'd love to see that being the case of what JP and DC did for this particular initiative that you and the administration is fighting for.
Right?
I was a sponsor.
Co-sponsor.
I was, but now I'm a watered down version of a sponsor
on the development fund. And I know the BHA plan has been around for I think I heard like 10 years. So we don't want to impede or slow down that process, because as you know how hard it is to get shovels into the ground. So we don't want to, slow down that process. But I do believe, right, to Dariella's point, what we have done in the last couple years, with whether it's ARPA dollars, whether it's with new initiatives, we have created a pipeline from BHA that wasn't there before, that we can start to, come up with new initiatives and ideas to earmark, right, in different developments. And, shout out to Megan and that whole team, Joel and Nick, who have been also working with us on this to create those contracts and to think things through. But I think, to your point, if it's not at this current site that has already gone through the process, I think it's, we have laid the groundwork. We have shown the administration, and BHA now knows that more of their residents can purchase a home. So I think, the data is there, the demand is there. And I think in future projects, I don't see why that could not be the case, but that is further conversations, we could definitely have with the administrator on that.
And I think I think my main advocacy point here is just as you all look to hire out a third party, right, that it is clear kind of how the scoring rubric will be for these projects that will be prioritized. And that scoring rubric giving some advantage when there is diverse housing types, right? Including affordable home ownership. I see that as a way for advocating for more affordable homeownership to be included in deals. And I think that it has to, that's something that has to come from this body
Right.
in order to trickle down and get to implementation.
Absolutely. And I would say this, Council Mejia and also to Dariella, the administration has laid out inside the presentation that there is an RFP, right, that they're going to be issuing on the home ownership side. So let's, put our recommendations and suggestions, send into the administration to see if that can be incorporated in that RFP on the affordable home ownership portion of this development fund.
Yeah.
And
And the rental.
Yeah, and the rental. We would definitely put, but they do have the criteria on the rental already, and affordability is part of it.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that we should utilize this opportunity to advocate fiercely for all the things that we want in this once in a lifetime opportunity. So if it's going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity, then we should be doing our due diligence and making sure that everything that folks need to be set up for success, and that we have a way of holding ourselves accountable to that we're writing it. So I think that it's a reasonable request, and I don't see why we would have any pushback on that.
Yeah, no, and I Ruben and the whole administration have been very responsive, and they are willing to continue to work with the council on this.
And you just said something that was a little bit weird to me.
What's that?
About the fact that they've been at this for 10 years, and because they've been at this for 10 years, that we're unable to make any changes or any recommendations.
On the Charlestown site, right?
So that we can't make any amendments, we can't advocate for certain things. Is that because?
My understanding is those plans have been approved.
Yeah.
Right.
They've gone through the permitting process.
Right, but now you're asking for more money so that you can actually put those plans bring those plans to life, and that comes with a $110 million accelerator fund. And now because we're having these conversations, just because we've had conversations 10 years ago and things have been approved doesn't necessarily mean that we can't negotiate in this moment. Is that what I'm hearing?
What I'm saying, those plans have been approved, right? And
But can they be reconsidered
I'm not sure
for some
on
of the
that.
advocacy that we've heard?
I'm not sure on that process, right? That could, maybe Dariella could speak to, if changing the plan.
That's a hard one for me because I'm not on the development team.
Right.
And that's a really big project.
Right.
So I want to not comment on that. I think for me, it's more about, my understanding is not the entire 110 million is going to Bunker Hill.
It's not, right.
So I think for me, it's about kind of the money that hasn't been earmarked, right? And how we set up kind of criteria before it hits RFP, before it's kind of out of this body's hands, like, I don't know if that's the right term, that we ensure that we're trying to prioritize the things that are going to affect affordable housing residents in a more holistic way, right? Because Bunker Hill's is not the first or the last public housing development that's going to be deposed, right? So I just think we have to look into the future and how we kind of address the housing needs, specifically of public housing residents. That's how I started my career, right? Like I did a lot of relocation work for the Boston Housing Authority. So I think that, I've been a part of a few Hope 6 projects, and I think that if I were to go back and say what were something that I'd want to change is having home ownership as an option, right? And when I was doing it, we didn't have Commonwealth Builder and the state funding. Right. Now we do, right? So, it's just about thinking about the next one. How do we not miss the opportunity?
Right. No, and I 100% agree. And I think we are, that would be my advocacy because I do believe home ownership is, one of the strongest forms of stability for families and people here in the city of Boston. And it's an opportunity for not only that stability that brings on so many social benefits, but also the financial benefits that it also brings on. So I am constantly going to be pushing home ownership and affordable home ownership here. And I think, to your point, we should be looking at future projects. Councilman Mejia, any other questions?
No, I have appreciate looking on to future projects, but I'm going to stay stuck on the one that we're in right now. So I just
That's your
reserve,
job.
that's my
Yes.
job. I'm going to do my job.
Yes. And I just want to make just one more point, and then I'm going to close the hearing, is that I love the breakdown that you have done, and just to kind of see like the talent and the professions that we're able to keep here in the city of Boston because of the affordable home ownership that we're providing. And then also just kind of seeing the income levels at what people are, or where people are able to buy. And, to your point, I remember when I was selling homes, and everybody who had, a good paying job was moving out to Brockton. And it was like a lot of the people that were city workers or state workers were moving out of the city of Boston, and it's always unfortunate that is where they have to look to buy. So I think affordable home ownership does so much, and I think it's one of our best tools because it keeps it affordable for the next generation of people as well. So I'm encouraged on the path that we're moving towards. I would love to get there a lot faster, but I do love the step that this administration has taken in what I believe to be the right direction in terms of putting more money towards home ownership. So with that said, I don't know if Councilman Mejia, you have any closing remarks? You are my co-sponsor.
Yeah, don't be trying to. I was your co-sponsor. I really do appreciate the administration's, the PowerPoint presentation and, Dariella's advocacy on what I believe is the direction that we should be moving in. And while I understand the dynamics that we don't have the luxury of being able to seize that moment with this particular project, allegedly. So I'm just gonna have to manage my expectations, but I really do believe that the vision that she has set forth is the way we should be moving when it comes to this accelerator fund.
Yes, so yeah, we have something already drafted from previous hearings that we've had. So maybe, we could definitely have a conversation on that with Dariella and look forward to helping get housing production unstuck here in the city of Boston and put a more priority on affordable home ownership. So I just want to thank the administration, the people who came to testify, Dariella, my council colleagues, my team, and also central staff for all their work on this hearing. And the hearing on docket number, and I have to go find it, I feel like I should have it memorized by now, 0108 is adjourned.